Hello, and welcome to That Wannabe Film Class, the show where we love movies. So each month we choose a theme, and each of our members brings one movie that fits the theme for us to talk about. Maybe it's a movie they love, maybe it's a movie they have been dying to see, maybe it's a movie they just find interesting. This month's theme is 2010 movies, and guys, that intro was a lie, because this episode is our first guest episode where one of our members does not choose the theme. Instead, our guest does. And for our guest this week, we have the one and only That Nerdy Site founder, Trevor Starkey. How are you doing, Trevor?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Trevor, for anyone who doesn't know you, who are you? Why are you here?
Who are you?
Tell us about yourself.
I am Trevor Starkey. I've been doing video game content creation stuff for about 5 years. I kind of got thrown into it around the time that Kind of Funny launched, and basically they inspired me to really start doing my own thing. So for a few years, I was doing my own blog with Trevor Trove. And I got a lot of great opportunities from that. I got to one of the most notable being that I freelanced for IGN for a brief period of time. And recently, I had this idea that I wanted to kind of get back into content creation after having been burnt out from doing it myself, and thinking, hey, I want to maybe do this with other people this time. And so I enlisted a whole bunch of different friends to get involved with me for this idea I had for a thing called That Nerdy Site. And friends, answered the call, brought their own ideas to the table, like this Wannabe film class. And we've been doing stuff for a couple months here.
Very cool. We are also joined by our regulars. We have the one and only, the woman who loves villains more than she loves herself, Chloe Naylor.
Hello, I'm here.
You are here. We also have, returning after a week off, the man with more opinions than he has podcasts for, Logan Wilkinson.
I'm hot and bothered this episode. We got a lot of pregame talk. My fucking blood's pumping. I'm ready, kids. I'm ready, boys and girls out here.
I'm glad. I feel like my objective with our pre-episode conversation is always to get everyone like
you're
loose.
Getting a good one here.
Yeah,
it's like the middle of the day, not late at night. It's like I'm fired up.
That's true. I guess you usually do record on the later end. I forget that because you're on a different time zone than I am.
Chloe's shaking her head like she's not ready for it. You're not, Chloe. You're not ready for this, Logan.
I am not a real person before noon.
We're also used to Logan being like the calm one.
True.
Oh, I mean, I am not, but that's because I also do the video game show with Logan.
Trevor being like, that sounds very different,
Yeah. We're used to Logan being like, here's my opinions, and then me being like, I'm not sure I agree, and then Logan's like, I mean, that's fair, I guess. Here's my other opinions, and I'm like, cool. And then Chloe and I are throwing dumb jokes at each other. This is our dynamic. But today we have a different Logan, and I am excited.
Yes.
So, like I said, because we have a guest, our first guest, which will be a regular thing on a month-to-month basis, our guest gets to choose the movie. So for 2010 movies, what movie have you chosen, Trevor? I'm sure the audience has no idea. They definitely haven't seen the title of this video or this audio. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I chose Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse because I think it is a phenomenal film that strikes me as something that could so easily fail on a myriad of different ways, but it succeeds spectacularly on every level for me. And when all was said and done, I saw the film, I want to say 9 times in theaters, and I continue to throw it on pretty much anytime I need something to cheer me up, because it's just such a fun and joyous and incredibly well-made movie. So when you guys said that the movies, the 2010 movies was going to be the theme for this month, and you wanted to bring me on as a guest, I was like, well, I've got the perfect pick. Haha.
You did. You immediately staked your claim to it when I asked you to be on for this month. That's an insane number of times to see it at a theater.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I saw it twice on opening night. I saw it back-to-back times opening night, because ever since the first trailer for it dropped, I was like, I am very excited for this art style, and I really want to see where this story goes and what they do with it. And so I saw it at Alamo. I had basically my ticket booked, and I got out of the movie. I was like, I need to go see that movie again, right now. And so I went and saw it at a theater closer to home on my way home from seeing it at the Alamo Drafthouse.
Nice.
Do you think that's the most you've seen a movie in theaters?
Yes, yeah, it's definitely
Okay.
the most I've seen a movie in theaters. It does not compare to one of my first girlfriends in college had seen Titanic 21 times in theaters.
Jesus.
Holy
Yeah.
Oh
shit.
my god.
So I don't think I'll ever have anything that like meets that level.
Sure.
But yeah, for me, 9 times. It like especially because when it came out last year, I often get hit very much by like seasonal affective disorder and just like the holidays and the winter season, even though like we laughably have like barely a winter season here in Phoenix. It always like leaves me kind of feeling down and bleh. And so this was a movie I could like, if I was having one of those days, I could just be like, all right, I'm gonna find a showtime and I'm gonna go see this movie and immediately cheer me back up.
Nice. Yeah, I definitely haven't seen any movies that many times in theaters, I don't think. I think my max maybe was like 6. Have you guys seen any, Logan, Chloe? That much?
I saw this one twice or maybe 3 times in theaters, I think.
Okay.
So the weird one for me, is I think the movie that I've actually seen the most in theaters isn't even a movie I love. It is Indiana Jones and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And I think
That's a
I've seen
decision.
that. I think I've seen it 5 times, and I think I saw it like 5 times in like 2.5 weeks, because basically I saw it opening night with my dad, because Indiana Jones is one of my favorite film series. And so I saw it with him, and then another friend was like, well, I want to see it. And so I watched it with him. And then another friend was like, I want to see it. And I watched it with him. So I started watching like all of the friends too, like individually. So that, like before I realized I had seen it like 5 times, and I was like, man, this is a movie. And it's basically just that. Like, I think like otherwise, I think I saw Force Awakens twice. I know I saw Spectre twice, but like otherwise, like I usually see a movie like twice in theater, then not beyond that. And I can't think of any movie other than Indiana Jones, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull that I've seen 5 times otherwise. So like that is, I think, my winner actually.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely recognize that I'm super out of the norm on that one, but a lot of times I'll go and see like a movie, especially as I've started like looking at things more critically in recent years. I'll go and see like a movie the first time and be like, okay, I'm just gonna like see what the experience is, and then try and see it a second time, knowing where it goes and where it is, and see like the small extra little details. And for me, with Spider-Verse, like I was still finding new things in that movie, like the 5th and 6th time in, and like just relishing those things. It's gotten to the point where I'm like, I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp on everything at this point, and nothing like really pops out new at me anymore. But it's still just like a great fun time.
Yeah, I had that experience watching it last night, where I noticed little details that I hadn't picked up on before, or I was watching it with friend of the show Ian Preschel, and Ian would be like, "Oh, this thing," and I was like, "I've seen this movie like 6 times and never noticed that." So it's really cool how layered it is.
Yeah, I also consumed like a ton of those. Like I would consume a ton of the like the, hey, this is what this means, and all of like the developer and the animator kind of like stories that were coming out around the movie. I was like, that's really cool, and like looking at all the stories and the behind the scenes stuff that they were kind of exploring with it. I just like ate all that up.
So this is a very good movie for you to be talking about then.
I like to think so.
So before we dive into Chloe's, I'm sure, insane recap, I just want to ask you guys a couple questions about what you thought of this movie going into it. So obviously, like, I know you had opinions before rewatching it, but what did you guys think, or if you remember, what did you guys think before actually seeing the movie? Because I know for me, like, I saw the trailer and I was like, oh, this looks really cool, but also it's Sony Animation, like they did the Emoji Movie. Do I have faith in this? So were you guys going in like, this is going to be great, I'm super excited? I know Trevor was super excited based on what he was saying, but where were you guys on it before your first watch?
Excited. Also
Okay.
very excited. And it turned out great.
It did.
Thank God.
Yeah, I mean, I figured like it couldn't be another Venom. So I
I would have been okay with that too.
And a lot of like the seeing it buzz, like the reviews and stuff that come out were pretty like glowing. So I felt pretty reinforced that this was going to be a good film. And if anything else, I was excited about seeing like the Miles Morales take on Spider-Man. Because that's obviously something we haven't gotten on the big screen before. And I had not personally been too exposed to it in other animated avenues or in the comics themselves. But I knew the character and I knew that he's, an interesting and beloved character to parts of the audience. So I was very excited to get exposed to that for the first time.
Sure. Logan, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say I was excited, definitely going in.
Mhm.
I am somebody who doesn't love animated superhero films that much. I don't love that genre kind of storytelling a lot. Usually.
Interesting.
I love live action superhero comic book stories more. And just live action films in general more, I feel like, than a lot of people in our community do. But for me, it was the word of mouth. It was everybody ranting and raving and being excited and like going off about how great it was. And I was like, all right, cool. Yeah. Like I do want to see this. And so then finally seeing it. Yeah. And just being like, oh, this is a very good film. They are all right. But yeah, like for me, it was very much like the kind of community as a whole, like really, really, really selling me on it.
Mm-hmm. So when you say you don't like animated superhero films, what movies come to mind for you when you're thinking like animated superhero movies?
I think Batman immediately, right? Like,
Okay.
like in particular, like whenever people talk about like who's the best Batman, who's favorite Batman, and they start saying like Kevin Conroy and those kind of things, and it's like, yeah, but like, hey, that's a whole different. That to me is like kind of an unfair comparison in a lot of ways, or even just like what their favorite Batman movie is, right? And if people don't say The Dark Knight or the 89 Batman film, I feel like the one they're going to say is Mask of the Phantasm, right? Like it's gonna be like this kind of thing, and it's like, I think I don't love it as much as other people do. I don't love that kind of story as much as other people do, and I think for me, like certain superhero characters work better live action versus animated kind of thing. And I think having literally just finished watching Into the Spider-Verse like an hour ago, and seen it yet again, I think that Spider-Man is a character that like in particular really works in an animated landscape, in an animated kind of setting, like that character in that world. And so I think that for me, that's part of why I think this movie is so special, is it does kind of tap into kind of everything that can make an animated film distinct and unique and special in comparison to like live action ones.
For sure. It's definitely, I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about this like a million times because it's such a distinctive part of the movie, but it definitely uses the animation in very unique ways, obviously, but it uses it to not just be like, oh, we have a superhero in an animated movie. It uses it to be like, hey, we have comic book, the moving picture. And it's dope.
Yes.
Yeah, that's where
you
I
are
like
aware.
Like I said earlier, I think there are so many ways that this movie could have failed, and I feel like so many of those come from like how they would have approached it from an animation style, and the fact that they went like full tilt into, hey, we're going to take all the things that people love about comics and we're just going to put it on the screen and let it be a comic book on the screen. And we're going to use kind of those conventions to heighten certain moments, to show multiple planes of action at the same time, which you can't, necessarily do in a straightforward live action film. I think all fuels into why like those things work in this movie where they might not have worked elsewhere.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. I think that the two most significant decisions probably in this movie, not to say that like none of the other decisions matter, because they definitely did. The writing mattered, everything mattered. This movie's very intricate, but the two most significant decisions probably were the animation style and making it about Miles, because I think those two things really saved it from being like just another Spider-Man movie, but animated. Anyways, moving past the preliminary discussions, the early talks, the little tidbits we got going on right now, we need to dive into the movie. And that means, Chloe, your time has come.
It's here. Okay, well, one second.
I will not. You have to be ready at this exact moment or you've completely failed.
Sorry, usually you go through the cast and crew first, so excuse me.
Oh, yeah, I do usually do that. I'll do that right now.
I was going to say, you did kind of skip over that part of the doc to throw it at Chloe, so I give her a little bit of leeway for not being ready to go right now.
I was checking something else instead of checking the document like a fool. This movie is directed by Peter Ramsey and Bob Persichetti and Rodney Rothman. It is written by Phil Lord and Rodney Rothman. Its producers are Avi Arad and Amy Pascal, who are best known as like the people who are generally in charge of Spider-Man at Sony. They've been in charge of it since, I think, Avi Arad was definitely in charge since the Tobey Maguire Spider-Mans. I'm pretty sure Amy Pascal was too. And also Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who are best known as the writers and directors of 21 Jump Street, Lego Movie, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and the MTV television animated show Clone High. Its cast includes Shamik Moore as Miles Morales, Jake Johnson as Peter B. Parker, Haley Steinfeld as Gwen Stacy, and Mahershala Ali as Aaron Davis. There are a lot of other big names attached to it because it's an animated movie and they can just hire whoever they want. Going through an animated movie's cast list is hard, so I'm not doing that. Those are the 4 that I chose. Also, fun fact, didn't know this, the Kingpin is played by, I forget his name, but he played
Liev Schreiber.
Sabretooth. Yes, Liev Schreiber. He played Sabretooth.
He played Sabretooth in was it the Wolverine? The really bad one.
Yeah.
Okay.
That dude.
It was X-Men Origins is where he played it.
Yeah. Oh god, X-Men Origins, I blocked that out. But yeah, so interesting thing for this movie is that it has 3 directors, which is pretty uncommon from what I've read in animation. Usually it tops out at about 2 directors, and they're usually more of like they've established themselves as a team, or they're going into it as a team. But this movie pulled in directors as it went along. It started with Bob Persichetti, who was the head of story on Little Prince and Puss in Boots. He was a story artist on Shrek 2, Flushed Away, and Monsters and Aliens. I don't know why I feel like those 3 movies are very up Chloe's alley, but I feel like they are.
They're all great movies.
Yeah, I knew it. And he was also an in-betweener at Disney from Hercules on through Treasure Planet. Do you guys know what an in-betweener is?
It's a
I do not.
British thing.
No. I mean, yes, that is a show, maybe. I don't know.
It is a show. It is a show. It is a show. Yes.
Fine. Okay. Fine, Chloe. Fine. You can make jokes. We get it.
Thank you.
So an in-betweener it doesn't really, to my knowledge, exist in 3D animation. It might still, but I know in 2D animation, which is what he was working on, it's basically when you draw the characters and the animation and everything, you have like your top animators who draw one position and then like the next significant position. They're called keyframes. So they're not drawing every single frame that's required to make the animation flow. And the in-betweener comes in and basically fills in the animation in between it. So the head animator is in charge of like essentially directing how the character moves by drawing, I don't know how many frames per second they draw, but then the in-betweener draws the majority of it just to fill in those gaps. So that's what he started off doing. Animation's cool.
Yeah, it is.
He was then joined by Peter Ramsey, who was the director of Rise of the Guardians. Logan, I saw that with you.
You did.
Yeah.
It was
good little movie.
way better than I thought it was going to be. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's cute. Peter Ramsey was the only first non-first time director to be on this film. This was Bob Persicchetti's first time as director. Obviously, he was head of story, like I said, so he's been in, power positions before, but this was his first time at the helm, unless my information is lying to me, which it could be. And Peter Ramsey also did storyboards for a lot of live action stuff. He was the storyboard artist on Nightmare on Elm Street 5, the 2000s Grinch movie, Independence Day, Men in Black, Fight Club, and many more. It's always fun to see how animators can like jump between live action and animation stuff, because I feel like a lot of people don't know that. And finally, that brings us to our last one, Rodney Rothman. He's the only non-animator to be working on the project. He became director because he was brought in to be a co-writer with Phil Lord, who he worked with on 22 Jump Street as well. He also wrote for The Late Show with David Letterman for a while. And then at a certain point, Bob Persichetti was like, look, you're doing a lot. Do you want to just... Actually, I don't think that's what happened. Sorry, I'm remembering. The guy came on and he was doing a lot. And he was like, I'm willing to take on more responsibilities, but I also want to be a director. And Bob Persichetti was like, sure. And that's how we got a 3-team director job. And from the interview I read with Bob, it seems like it went well. And from the product they gave us, it definitely went well.
Nice.
Yeah, that's another element where it could have just failed miserably, where you've got like 3 different voices kind of pulling the project in different directions. But nope, they all worked wonderfully together to create this masterpiece.
Especially when you have like not just these three major, like not just three directors in charge, but you have like Phil Lord and Chris Miller are the producers on this. And they have, very strong opinions, I imagine, because they are Phil Lord and Chris Miller, who are very well known, very well respected, fired off of Solo, big deals. And then you also have like Avi Arad and Amy Pascal, who are big time producers who've been doing Spider-Man for so long. So you definitely have a lot of voices, a lot of cooks in this kitchen. And the fact that they were able to work together to find one vision that works so well is impressive.
Oh, if only we could say the same for Star Wars.
Oh.
Ooh, she's dropping tea fast.
You were the one that like complained about it on Twitter in the pre-show.
Yeah,
Did you?
Now you're trying to drop the bomb in the middle of the episode here to stoke the flames.
Just, yeah, a little bit of
I mean, I knew she didn't like Rise of the Skywalker. I was aware.
Oh, man.
She was just sitting there in the pre-show, like, quiet, and I'm like, I know you don't like it either. I know you're on my side.
It's way too early to get into this, though.
We're not getting into it. We're
Thank
skipping
God.
on. Okay, wait, we're not getting into it. You brought it up.
If you want to know that Nerdy Site's thoughts, there's a spoiler cast out there as part of that Nerdy Site show. We did a bonus episode with basically almost everybody on the site who's not on this podcast and me.
Because we already talked about movies. Sorry, is it you, Christian,
Cameron, and Frank? Yeah.
Okay.
And then we had Josh Silverman from Constantly Calibrating Podcast join us. He's a friend of mine here in Phoenix.
It's awesome. Logan, you were saying?
Here's the thing. By like next week, the next Wannabe film class will just begin with our abbreviated Rise of Skywalker thoughts. Because by then, all of us will have seen it, and I want to talk to them about it. So it's just going to happen. You're going to get that. You're going to get two Wannabe film class. You're going to get two Nerdy Site spoiler casts for this movie. Congrats, everybody.
2 for the price of 1 Nerdy Site.
Yeah.
Chloe,
Yes.
we've given a lot of build up. I've realized my mistake in the order in which we do things, but now it is truly time for the recap. Are you ready?
Yes.
You're goddamn right you are.
So, yeah.
Take it away.
Goddamn right.
So first we start with glitchy logos and the sickest beat ever. You love to see it. And Chris Pine, I wrote Spooderman for whatever fucking reason.
Spooderman.
He gives us a rundown of who he is and what we missed in the far more inferior Raimi movies. Eat your heart out, Tobey Maguire.
Damn.
He is.
Fun fact.
Yeah.
They originally considered Tobey Maguire to be the voice of Peter B. Parker in this movie.
Wow.
Yeah.
Glad they didn't.
I like that, like, the Chris Pine version of it is, like, so familiar to us from the Raimi, but it's, like, everything is, like, slightly off, slightly different. You have, like, just little spins on all of those iconic moments that we remember from Tobey Maguire. So it's definitely not him, but it's, a very parallel universe to the same Raimi Spider-Man.
The reason they decided not to go with Tobey Maguire was because they thought it would be too confusing to audiences, that they would think like, oh, is this just the Sam Raimi Spider-Man older? Which I get. I understand.
It'd have been fucking cool if they'd done it though.
I would have. Jake Johnson did a great job. I would have
for sure. Jake Johnson did amazing, yeah.
I would almost guarantee we're going to see Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Mans like pop up in the next one. And maybe Tom Holland too.
Tobey Maguire Spider-Man pops up, I will break into tears.
Yeah, it's gonna be awesome.
Love the Sam Raimi movies so much.
Yep. Me and you very much agree on this.
Not Spider-Man 3.
They're fine.
I do love that Spider-Man 3 dance reference though. That's a fun time.
Yes, it's yeah.
Anyways.
What happens next, Chloe?
He's the only thing standing between New York City and Oblivion, right? Because he's the only Spider-Man, right? No. Hard cut to Miles Morales. He's humming, he's doodling when he should be packing for school, introduces us to what kind of person he is. He's goofy, talented, stupid smart 'cause he's going away to like a private school. His dad driving there.
Sings a version of Sunflower that does not line up with the actual song and always messes me up when I'm listening to the actual song.
Nice.
I start going into the like too early.
Thanks, Miles. His dad drives him to school, after catching him, like, tagging on his way there. Establishes their dynamic and relationship, how Miles feels about going to this elitist school. He's not a fan.
It's also that scene of him in the car is so good at what I think is one of this movie's like best writing qualities, in that it's so good at throwing a lot of information at you, but doing it through the conflict between characters, so you don't feel like you're being given exposition. Because I was sitting there thinking about this for taking notes and everything, and in that scene with his dad, like, you establish that his dad doesn't like Spider-Man, and you establish that Spider-Man is well known enough and significant enough of a figure that they know the "with great power comes great responsibility" line, which I feel like is such a significant world building thing. But they do all of it through the conflict of a son and his dad awkwardly communicating with each other, and it's so good.
Let's see. Quick school montage show Miles struggling, but also actively trying to flunk out, because, again, he hates it there. I get it. His teacher catches on to this and signs him a personal essay, which, Great Expectations, gross. I hated reading that in school. That was the worst one. That was the worst one. Miles sneaks out, goes to hang out with his uncle Aaron, so he's clearly closer to his uncle than he is to his own father. They're vibing.
Fun little cameo of Donald Glover from Community and Spider-Man on the TV in there.
Oh shit, yeah, you're right.
I did not notice that.
And another one we passed that I like is when before the dad picks him up, when Miles is like walking to school, he like high fives, handshakes a buddy of his, and it's basically the handshake that Tom Holland and Ned have in Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Huh.
So, like there's like the movie is littered with like love and references to all the other Spider-Man movies.
Also, just littered with so many really cool like real world touches. Like the one that I kept noticing this time around was the like Chance the Rapper poster, like littered throughout like the world and in his bedroom and like on billboards out there. Yeah,
with the four on his hat instead of 3.
Yeah.
And even beyond that, there's also just like so many great filmmaking and like storytelling techniques. The first one that I really noticed was like that scene that you were talking about, Trevor, when he is walking through walking down the street and he's seeing all his friends and talking to them. It's, it's a one shot, which it's easy to look at that and be like, okay, well, a one shot isn't that hard. It's animation, which from what I understand from seeing a tweet from that animator, it's a lot harder than we give it credit for. But more importantly, it's also just like a great storytelling way of being like, he's comfortable in this world. Like he's smoothly flowing through it and we're following him smoothly through it. It's not like cutting around him. This is just him in his element. I love it.
Yeah. And I back on the Chance the Rapper thing, since it's never actually like named as Chance the Rapper, it's just like his iconography. I like to think that in Miles's world, he's Community Chess the Rapper, but that's just me.
Community Chess Rapper.
Nice.
Respect that.
Let's see, where were we? Oh, vibing with Uncle Aaron. Aaron takes him to this fresh wall underground by the subway that they can tag.
Teaches him the shoulder touch.
He teaches him the shoulder touch. Great thing.
Hey.
So funny. Hey.
Hey.
Hey. Which he does some great, dope, like Great Expectations graffiti art. That is super cool.
Yep.
But through that whole spray painting montage as he's making that, anxiety inducing as hell because you see this weird fucking spider crawling around getting ever so closer to Miles. So scary. Ends up biting him, and you think it's gonna be like this whole ass thing when you see like the venom enter his blood, and like Miles is gonna freak out like, oh my god. No, he just smacks it and moves on.
Yeah, and that like right there's a great use of the comic book framing devices where they like put it in frames and you see kind of like the venom going into the blood cells and changing the blood cells and stuff, and then it cuts back out, and yeah, it's just like
She's like, oh, whatever, okay.
The use of comic paneling in this movie is so good. It's like, and not just because it makes it feel like a comic book, which it does, but it's also just such a great like way of conveying information and visuals. And I feel like we call movies a visual medium, but the reality is that comic books are really the most visual medium. And seeing that kind of bleed into this film is really cool. I would like to see that done more, I think. Also, Chloe, what is this moment?
Oh my gosh, is this the inciting incident?
It is.
Wow.
Miles is bitten and our whole story takes off.
Love
Oh, class.
yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Bellevue.
Well,
I like having Trevor on, guys. Trevor's got to bring some fun energy here.
That's because Trevor likes to make fun of me, and I appreciate it.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Oh, happy
We've,
birthday,
thank you.
Ben!
As we're recording, it is Ben's birthday. Everybody wish him a happy birthday on Twitter.
It will not be my birthday when you listen to this, but whatever. You can
cares?
wish me a happy birthday anyway.
You know what'll happen.
So how does this story get going after the inciting incident, Chloe?
His spider powers kick in overnight, and his life becomes a nightmare at school the next day, as if school wasn't bad enough.
So good.
It definitely was already a nightmare for him.
That's true, but like, oh, let's make it worse. Worst case scenario for everything. You want to flirt with
Yeah.
the new girl and do the shoulder touch? No, your hand is now stuck in her hair, and she has to shave her head.
Is this puberty? Am I going through puberty?
He says it out loud. Oh, I shouldn't have said
Yeah.
that. Why are my
Yeah.
voices so loud? Hate to see it.
And that's another great use of the comic book trope of seeing the speech, like the thought bubbles, basically. Like, oh, he hears those thought bubbles and they are loud voices in his head, and that's how it's manifested on screen. It's just like another great, awesome. I love this.
Yeah. While he's evading like the school security guard because he knows he snuck out last night, he's all sticky or whatever, having a time of his life. He makes his way back to his dorm room and finds his comic books, and he's like, "What the? There's only one Spider-Man. Right? No." He runs back to the subway where him and Uncle Aaron were making their graffiti art, just to confirm that the spider that bit him was just normal, right? That thing is glitchy as hell. If I saw that, and I'd be like, okay, well, I'm done. No, this is it. While he's down there, he wanders right into a Spider-Man versus Lizard fight. Horrifying. In the following kerfuffle, Chris Pine's Spider-Man saves Miles from falling, and then he's like, oh shit, we're the same. We both got, that Peter tingle, whatever the fuck, right? That's what it's called.
Far from home.
Oh, man. So Spider-Man's like, okay, I want to show you the ropes, but first, I gotta deal with this interdimensional collider thing. Miles is like, cool, you do that, bro. Unfortunately, shit hits the fan. Collider momentarily malfunctions when, like, Spider-Man's dunked into the streams. Everything blows up.
Mm-hmm.
And
That action scene also is just
it's
so
real good.
good. It's fantastic. I think like it's something that's easier to do obviously in animation because you're not dealing with like actual actors having to do actual stunts, but the wide shots for action are so good, and I wish we did that more in movies because so many movies are like close-up action.
And he like flows so seamlessly through the environment that it helps establish, this guy has been doing this for years and years and years, and he knows how to improv and fly on the fly.
Yeah.
He also has some damn good one-liners. That's my Spider-Man.
Are you mad at me? It seems like you're mad at me.
I love Spider-Man. Great.
Me too.
Unfortunately, because I started liking him, he dies. About
The
5
Chloe
minutes
curse
later.
strikes again.
The curse strikes again.
Oh, are you talking? You're talking about Spider-Man. I thought you were talking about the Green Goblin here.
No.
He dies too.
Nah,
He
he's
died. Oh, okay.
nah,
I called him Lizard
Spider-Man's
earlier.
like
I'm not
charming. He's got that like poofy hair thing with like the close on the side. Like he's. I feel like he's got Chloe's type energy. He's not a villain, but like
I think that's why I think the Green Goblin has the Chloe type energy as the giant monstrous villain here in this moment.
Not quite there.
Okay.
Yeah, right there.
No.
Is Chris Pine the best Chris?
He's going against.
I gotta give the edge to Evans personally, but I
you
think
know,
Chris
no,
Pine
I think-
Chris Pine is certainly in the running.
Rank your Chris's. Hello,
Chris
and
Evans.
welcome to that Wannabe Film Class segment. Rank your Chris's, where we rank our Chris's.
It's Chris Evans.
Trevor, rank your Chris's.
I would go Evans, Pine, because he's done so much more with so much less, I would say, than Hemsworth, and then Pratt. And Pratt Pratt has fallen in my favor over years because I loved him back in Parks and Rec days. And then it was very exciting seeing him in Guardians of the Galaxy, and then just all his like personal politics and stuff. I'm like, oh, you're just more and more annoying the more I hear about you.
Yeah.
So he's fallen out of favor a little bit.
I'd probably do either Pine or Hemsworth first, and then Evans, and then Pratt.
Pine or Hemsworth, Evans, Pratt. Okay, gotcha.
I would say Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, Chris Pine, Chris Pratt.
Okay. I feel like we're all kind of in a similar boat. Like mine is Chris Pine, Chris Evans, Chris Hemsworth, Chris Pratt. But really, it's like Chris Pine, Chris Evans, and Chris Hemsworth are all great, and then Chris Pratt exists.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for the same thing Trevor said, right? Where it's like, I liked him on Parks and Rec, but then it's just like, yeah, but you're just kind of a blug human being, so...
Even beyond that, like, I agree with that entirely, but it's also just looking at the movies and the stuff he does. It's like, yeah, I really liked you in Guardians of the Galaxy, but I kind of feel like everything else you've been doing is on a similar note, and even his performance in Guardians of the Galaxy, the more he's been Star-Lord, the more I'm kind of like, I guess. Like, I love Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, but he is not why I love it. Off this diatribe, Spider-Man dies, and that is our end of Act 1.
Shit, you right.
Yeah, because now Miles has been given the goober. He doesn't have anyone to train him. He knows he needs to do this thing, but he has no idea how to do it. And that begins Act 2.
Yeah. As he runs away from that, he barely evades the scary Prowler. But he clearly doesn't appreciate the sick music cues and score that Prowler has. Like, come on, that's awesome.
Prowler is so cool.
So awesome, man. God.
Horrifying.
It's horrifying,
Oh,
but
yeah.
that's fine.
Anything cool is a little horrifying.
Damn.
Yeah.
That's like deep.
Wow.
Thank you. I know things.
Anyways, city comes together the following day to mourn Spider-Man. Miles.
Which is going to be one of my scenes, as I said.
Is it? Yeah.
That is also going to be one of my scenes. That's my favorite scene in this entire movie.
Nice. Miles realizes he has to be the one to stop the collider and save the day, but in his training, he breaks the goober, and
Idiot.
then he feels helpless, and he's like, well, fuck, you know. So he goes to Peter Parker's grave, and he's like, I'm so sorry, man. And then somebody approaches behind him, knocks him out, but ta-da! We're introduced to Peter B. Parker.
Yep.
Yee.
Hell yes. So, Peter B has been Spider-Man for over 20 years, and he's been going through it, you know? And fortunately, there's nothing like a portal to another dimension to get you out of a depressive episode in the middle of your midlife crisis. Thank God for that.
And a strange small child who has similar powers to you.
Yeah. So,
Does he want kids?
does he?
Maybe.
Maybe.
I mean, no.
He comes around to
He does
it.
not at all want kids. It's a key characteristic of him.
True. I love these. Like, I know we've gone through a lot of these comic book intros already at this point, but this was the moment where I was really like, I love these comic book intros because they're such a creative way of giving us voiceover exposition.
Yep.
And I feel like a classic thing you're told with screenwriting is don't do voiceovers. Like, you don't want it. This filmmaking is a show don't tell medium, and this movie definitely shows a lot, but the idea that you can never tell and that you can never do voiceover is, in my opinion, and in many people's opinions who I've listened to who are professionals in this industry, flawed. And Chloe, you can speak to this too, because we just talked about Paddington 2, where it's like Paddington 2 uses voiceovers to introduce characters, and it helps you connect to the world more, and it also tells you what Paddington cares about because the voiceover is in the form of him writing to his aunt. And this is the same thing where it's like the voiceover gives you information, but it also sets that tone of the comic book. So creative voiceover, it's cool.
It sets up a great hey, we don't have time to go into a full origin for these, but you're going to get like the highlights for each of them. And that it's set up with Chris Pine being more or less like the Spider-Man we know. The fact that we see that completely juxtaposed here against Peter B. Parker sets up a whole new dynamic and gives you like a very fleshed out picture into what this guy's world has been like for the last 20 years. In a minimum amount of seconds, and then again we'll see it later on as we see a couple more like fleshed out, just how they use that to throw so much at people, but you're able to follow along. I think of it similar to like we see in like talking heads and docudramas and comedies and stuff like that, like The Office, like Parks and Rec, where you can use voiceover and use that format to have like the character expressing one thing while you're seeing something completely different. Like here we have Peter B. Parker saying like, yeah, no, everything was good, but we see him like slumped in a shower eating pizza and very super clearly depressed. And it just plays with kind of those two ideas so well.
For sure.
I think it also works for me because of the fact that like the movie's very much aware of what it's doing too. Like it keeps referencing back to like one last time. So it's very much like aware of the joke of like using this as well, that I think it lands all of them as well in that regard.
This movie, and I think any movie that Phil Lord and Chris Miller do, and like obviously Chris Miller was just a producer on this one, but Phil Lord was one of the key writer, at least in the first draft. And I think one of the things that they're so good at is meta, but it's like it's past the kind of ironic meta-ness that some movies have, and it becomes this kind of like sincere meta, and it's wild, and I love it. And also, this is completely sidetracking from that, but in that little recap of Peter B. Parker's life, there's when he first gets to this New York, there's a sign in Times Square for Hi Hello on Broadway, which I loved because that's a little John Mulaney reference for you.
Yeah. Like all of those little like the little twists. They have a Clone High reference where it's Clone College, I want to say.
I didn't see that.
So like in that universe, Clone High did better, at least enough to get like a spin-off. I want to say like there's a Bridesmaids thing, but it's not Bridesmaids.
Bridesmaids, yeah.
It's like Baby Shower or something like that. But yeah, a Hi Hello instead of Oh Hello is a wonderful little riff on John Mulaney being in the film.
Yeah.
Love it. Love Times Square.
Does anyone love Times Square?
No, I love it in this movie. I've never been to New York.
That's fair. Oh yeah, that's fair.
I enjoy it. It's got a very like manic energy to it.
That's fair.
Admittedly, I've only been there
cool.
Yeah.
I went there for 5 seconds and I was like, no.
Fun Times Square fact for me. I went when my sister graduated high school. She and I went for a week to go like see shows and be tourists and stuff. And within like an hour of checking into our hotel, we went out, walked, like we were staying right off Times Square. We went out, walked down the street, walked down Times Square, and this guy that I knew from here, from Phoenix, who I had gone to college with, and he had moved out there, hands me a flyer. And so like in this, world of, 1 million plus people that are walking through Times Square every day kind of thing or whatever, like I stumble upon a guy that I knew from 2,000 miles away. Very small world kind of weirdness.
Is he working in Broadway then? Or some kind of theater thing?
At the time it was basically a promo card for like a jazz night thing at a bar I think he was working at. He has since gone on to he was a Blue Man out there in New York for a little while at the Blue Man Group show, and he also had like an off-Broadway show that he created and directed with him and a few other people playing like I don't remember the name of the quartet, but basically they play as a barbershop quartet.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. Jonathan Howard, shout out to him.
Congratulations, Jonathan. You're doing some creative, fun work, it sounds like. But you know who's doing more creative, fun work? Phil Lord in his writing for this movie. And what does he give us next, Chloe?
So Miles accidentally knocks out Peter B. Parker and continues to give him repeated head trauma as they evade the police. It
looks like a young Spider-Man dragging a homeless corpse.
Right? Love it.
Also the police, the PDNY.
So
PDNY.
So good. This movie's so perfect, man.
It is.
They make it back to Aaron's apartment. Miles ties up Peter. They, have their little thing. And Peter's like, I gotta go home, man, so I'm gonna bounce. Miles successfully convinces him that they both gotta work together, shut down the collider before, it blows up New York.
Yeah.
So,
He gets him on his side eventually.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'd say he convinces him so much as guilts him.
Just kind of guilts him,
Calls attention to the fact that he's guilting him. Is it working?
Working.
Yeah.
And I love the part Peter just he's like, no, it's not, and then just screams like, yeah.
Don't let him win. Don't let him win. You're gonna let him win. Fine. All right, you win.
You win. All right, let's go.
You've used that as a reaction video so many times, Chloe.
It's such a mood, man. God.
I get it. It is.
You know what? Yeah. God.
In many ways, I feel like in many situations it's such a mood. But yes, I do know.
Yes. 100%.
I love the sideways walking.
Oh,
Yeah,
I know.
walking up the wall.
This scene.
Yeah.
That's just such a great way to represent how Spider-Man's perspective of the world is unique and different. And I feel like it probably isn't very easy to do on actual live action films. So the fact that they thought to do it in this movie is really cool. I'm a big fan of it.
Yeah, and it further kind of shows the disparate level of skill and comfort between the two characters, because you have Miles basically constantly trying to also shuffle down on his hands, and he's very much leaning up, whereas Peter is just kind of nonchalantly walking up the side of a building.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That little guy in his window who's alarmed. It's great.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, what?
Just go back to bed.
I feel like not much. He doesn't make a big enough deal, knowing that Spider-Man has died, that there are two other Spider-Men clearly with Spider-Man abilities outside his apartment. I wonder if he immediately called up. He should have been calling up the Daily Bugle for a hot scoop.
I want to believe that man's just tripping. He took a couple pot brownies. He saw this and he's like, I made a mistake.
I'm gonna
go to bed.
Yep.
Yep,
No,
I'm gonna go pass out. I should not have done this.
Yeah.
And when the worlds start colliding and he sees the telephone posts from other universes, he's gonna be really messed up.
Oh yeah.
The actual story of Into the Spider-Verse is this man going to rehab and experiencing an entire journey of getting past his addiction to drugs because he assumed that he was tripping too hard this entire film. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse 2 is going to be his movie.
It's just
you
about
heard it here
this guy.
first.
Yep.
Just about this guy, yeah.
Spoilers, guys. Sorry.
I mean, Sony almost made an Aunt May movie. I wouldn't be surprised.
They get burgers. Peter gives him super important Spider-Man advice. You put baby powder in the suit, especially in the joints.
Yep.
They realize they got to go to Alchemex, get the new goober, shut down the collider, and it's go time. They suit up, and then Peter B channels his inner Edna mode and tells Miles, hey, no capes, man. They infiltrate. We also get the coolest reveal of this dimension's Doc Ock. That really wasn't expecting that first time seeing this.
Peter has to re-examine his personal biases.
Yeah, that's also great. I remember seeing that line the first time in the movie and being like, that is a fucking brilliant little throw in, as he adds it to his plan.
It's something that I love in movies that I feel like I'm seeing more, because for so long movies tried to be hip and young, and they would do it in very jarring, very pandering ways. So I'd watch and I'd be like, okay, I get that you're trying to feel like you're modern and you're talking like a modern person talks and doing things modern people do, but this is not how teenagers use social media. Shut the hell up. And I feel like I've been seeing it more in movies lately, and this is a great example of it, where they are just kind of peppering in a couple things that you would not have heard 4, 5, 6 years ago. So it feels relevant and modern to the age, and these are people who exist in our time without feeling like they're pandering to us. I love it. I love being this is 2019 or this is 2018. We know what personal biases are. So they infiltrate.
You meet Doc Ock.
Yeah.
Great reveal.
Olivia Octavius.
Yeah. Oh, your friends call you Doc Ock? My friends call me Liv. My enemies call me Doc Ock. Yeah, thank you. Love it.
Yeah. Also, the way Peter recites the password to Miles is such a great little reminder that they are both very smart, but also that Peter's a bit smarter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he read the password through a reflection, so like that's backwards. Oh man.
Remember all of it, recited to Miles very quickly. I could track pretty much none of those numbers, and Miles remembered all of it up to the last 2 digits.
Yeah.
They're geniuses.
Wonder how many little hidden Easter eggs are in that password.
Oh, I'm sure there's tons.
There's about.
I wonder how many little hidden Easter eggs are in the files.
Yeah, the files I would definitely be curious to go through, and I've not ever like screenshotted that. And I imagine there's actually probably not too much, because there would be like listicles about like, here are all the Easter eggs in that shot. One of the shots that we're coming up on though that I love is when they're like escaping. And they're like casually walking through the cafeteria. You have everybody like react. My favorite reaction in that shot is somebody who's just like, "Oh God, not this bullshit again!" Like, and she's like the only one. She's just clearly like, I'm just here to do my master's, guys. What the? But everybody else is like pulling out their guns and saying like, "Let's get Spider-Man!" And I just love that like there's somebody here working at Alchemex that is not on the like let's kill Spider-Man train. She's just there.
Just there to work, you know.
It has very Iron Man 3.
Yeah.
I'll go. These
guys.
people are weird. Energy.
Yeah.
Good part.
Also, the bagel throw right after. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Bagel.
God,
that was so great. So they're running through the forest. Miles is like, "Hey, I run better than I swing." And he's like, "You gotta swing to get away then." But in the ensuing chase, we're introduced to our next spider, Spider-Gwen. Which, side note, I love her so much. I always want to be here.
Yep.
Spiders escape. Doc Ock reconvenes with Wilson Fisk, but not before why we find out he wants his collider built. Apparently, his wife and son walked in on him fighting Spider-Man, and we're so horrified that they ran away and were then hit by a truck. So I guess we all have different reactions to finding out we like a villain, which, fine, good on her. So Gwen, Miles, and Peter B all go to Aunt May's house to find out if other Peter had a place for all of his gadgets. And guess what? He does. And 3 other
Aunt
spider
May
people
played.
have made their way there. What?
With some great actors, too. I'm going to insert those now because I just don't want to read off this giant list. But, like, Aunt May, played by Lily Tomlin, is a great casting choice.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Beyond just the fact that I love Lily Tomlin as a whole, but, like, I think she's a great voice for Aunt May. And then we have...
And continues the track record of all the Aunt Mays having been, like, Academy Award nominated actresses.
It's true. And then we have Kimiko Glenn playing Penny Parker. Kimiko Glenn is great. I don't know if you guys have ever listened to the Waitress soundtrack, but she plays one of the characters in Waitress on Broadway, and it's fantastic.
I knew her
She's
from Orange is the New Black.
Yeah, I've never seen Orange is the New Black, but I knew she was like a significant character in that, right?
Who does she play in
Yeah,
that?
she comes in as like the second season. She's the Asian girl that basically is like super like protesty.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's Penny
Gotcha.
Parker.
Oh.
And then we have John Mulaney, who we've already referenced as Peter Porker, Spider-Ham. And we have, of course, Nick Cage as Spider-Man Noir.
Love it, man.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I love one of the things that like they don't call too much attention to it, but the fact that like this universe's Spider-Man has like this basically spider cave, like ties to the idea that he's also merchandised the hell out of himself, that we see introduced at the beginning. Like he's got a cereal, he's got a Christmas album, so like he's been making money off of it to help afford this extravagant cave that he has, compared to every other Spider-Man we've ever known, where he's just like, he hides who he is, he doesn't take any money off of it, and he's always like seemingly destitute and struggling with that. So I love that this Spider-Man was like, hey, I'm gonna like get paid for this so that I can do my job better.
Yeah. Good on him.
It also gives him such Batman vibes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it has obviously like the cave is littered with like Easter eggs to Spider-Man past kind of stuff with certainly all the costumes, including like the PS4 version of Spider-Man's costume, but like the Spider Jeep is like a toy from the 70s and stuff, and so like them throwing that in there's a little nod. It is kind of the equivalent to like the bat caves that we see in a lot of modern incarnations that are just littered with Easter eggs of Batman stories past.
And it is crazy the amount of, not just like the things they throw in the background, the things that they like pull from in Spider-Man lore without being like too in your face about it. Because like Spider-Ham is a great example of a dumb little comic that was made in like the 80s, I think. And the people, I read an interview with people who created it, and they're like, yeah, we didn't think this was ever going to be anything. It was a joke. But now it's a major character in a movie voiced by one of the most successful stand-up comedians of the era. And like the Spider-Mobile, like you're saying, was like, the Spider-Mobile was a dumb car that Spider-Man drove in the comics for like 5 years maybe, and then everyone hated it and they got rid of it, and now it's back. And it's there's a very thin line between like overusing nostalgia to just drive your story and like keep people engaged, and like honoring the past and nostalgia. And I think part of it is because Spider-Verse is a very self-aware movie that is about like the different versions of Spider-Man. It makes it easier for that to work. But it's also just a testament to how good the story is, because it never feels like the nostalgia is what it's banking on. It's just fun little Easter eggs that make you happy.
Yeah, it's also something that I think obviously can only really work in this medium, because the introduction of each of these three characters gives you the introduction of three other wildly different art styles. You have obviously the first three Spider people we meet are all kind of designed the same way, designed in a similar scope, but then you have Spider-Man Noir in completely black and white, different design element. You have Penny Parker being very anime inspired, and then you have, of course, Peter Porker being like the Looney Tunes. And so they get to once again like throw these other completely wild art styles at the wall, and it works. They've created a world where they can all blend those different animation styles together, and you understand it, and you go along for it.
Yeah. How do they handle meeting all these Spider-Men, Chloe? What comes next?
Oh, they're all like, their spider senses tingle, and they're like, oh shit, we're all the same. And then they all come up with the plan that like, all right, hey, we're gonna destroy the Collider. One of us has to stay behind. And Miles is like, hey, I'm from this world. I'll do it. But then they realize that like, Miles isn't quite ready yet. He's not up to par. So he kind of sadly leaves the group, goes to Aaron's apartment for like some help and encouragement. Gets the opposite of that when he finds out that his uncle is the Prowler that has been chasing him this whole time. So
basically from the moment they say you're not up to par to when he like fully embraces his identity, this movie is just Miles' life sucking.
Yeah, pretty much. 'Cause yeah, he runs away now. He like goes back to Aunt May's house. He's like, oh god, my uncle's the Prowler. And Spider-Noir's like, whoa, this origin story is crazy, man. Unfortunately, Prowler had been tracking him this whole time, so all of Kingpin's goons show up at Aunt May's house.
This movie's Sinister Six, basically. They're not called out, but there are six bad guys there.
Yeah, very much that vibe. And look at that. One Spider-Verse movie, they introduced the Sinister Six, and the Amazing Spider-Man series spends 2 movies trying to build it up and fails.
Yeah, sucks.
Trust good filmmakers, guys.
So, in the fight, Prowler catches Miles, and then he realizes that this kid he's been chasing this whole time is his own nephew. Which really...
Oh god, it's such a gut-wrenching moment where, like, Miles, like, the life is being choked out of him, and you can just barely hear him squeak out, like, Uncle Aaron.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my god, that's terrifying.
So, and then, like, god, I was so worried, and he puts the mask back on. I'm like, no, don't, like, kill him or anything. And he decides not to. Which sucks, because then Kingpin, like, shoots him for not killing Miles. So, like, oh, great.
Yep.
Aaron is a really great, complicated character for me. Like, I really enjoy the villain character of, he's a bad guy and he hurts people and he like is a thief and he's a criminal for sure. But I don't know what his line is. It seems like his line is not killing in general, but his line is definitely like there are people he cares about and they matter more to him than like money and success and even his life. And I'm not saying he's a good guy, but it does make me appreciate the complexities of his character.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I definitely don't think he thought he was going to die in this moment. So like it's he's not going to kill his nephew, who he has a very clear connection to that we've seen. So like I envision it like he's putting the mask back on and he's going to like let him get away and just tell Kingpin he lost him would be his motivation. And then obviously he just doesn't get that far in the objective.
I always imagine that like because Kingpin was talking in his ear, which means I assume that he knows Kingpin can see him, that I'm not saying he like knew he was going to die in that moment, but I imagine he at least knew Kingpin's going to know I let this guy go and I'm going to have to be like on the run from this point forward or I will die. And then Kingpin just killed him faster than he thought.
Yeah. I do. This is one of those like in a lot of the reading and analysis that I've done on the movie. My understanding is that based on how like this is the adaptation of like Uncle Aaron's death being like the inciting incident for like the rise of Miles Morales' Spider-Man, sounds like it was handled better in the film here than it was in the comics. I've not read the comics myself, and I couldn't even go into like the specifics of why this works or doesn't. But for me, it really works here. So I love that they were able to kind of revamp that in a way that seems to have done right by the fan base.
Yeah, I haven't read the like origin of Miles Morales comics, but I've read some of the later ones, and I know that I watched a video a while ago. I forgot to look it back up for this, but it was basically talking about how they felt that this movie kind of fixes the character of Miles Morales because up until that point, Miles in the comics was kind of just like Peter Parker 2.0, and this movie is able to, even though there are elements of Peter Parker there, such as like his uncle dies and that's a big inciting incident, it's able to change who he is and change his character and his personality to make him his own character and a hero in his own right, instead of just being like, yeah, so the Ultimate Universe killed off Peter Parker, so I guess this is our new Spider-Man. He's similar to Peter. So that's really cool. I can't like speak heavily towards it because I, again, haven't read a ton of Miles stuff, especially not his origin stuff, but it's cool that they were able to give Miles more of his own identity and also just make Miles like a mainstream character because like people know who Miles Morales is now, which is amazing.
Thank God.
Yep.
Yeah. So Aaron dies in Miles' arms when they get to like safety after apologizing and telling Miles that he's the best of us. Like, oh God, hurts every time. But Miles has like no time to grieve as his dad shows up and he's got to bounce before his dad finds out who he is. Miles goes back to his dorm room. The other Spider.
It's a heartbreaking moment for his dad too when he realizes that not only was his brother the Prowler, but also that his brother's dead.
His brother's dead.
Like,
yeah.
And like I love that he reacts to that like with anger and rage, thinking that Spider-Man had done this or that this new Spider-Man had done it.
Right. The other Spider people meet up with Miles in his dorm room, tell him he's not alone. They've all suffered terrible losses, and they all list off like who they've lost. And Peter Porker didn't even say who he lost, so it's probably the most devastating backstory of all.
Yeah. I think that's one of my also favorite. I know, like, it's hard to say my favorite things about this movie, I guess, because so many things about this movie are great. But it is a quality I appreciate in this film is that it knows when to be serious. And I feel like a lot of superhero movies looking at UMCU don't always know when to be serious. They undercut their like dramatic moments with a joke. And this movie does too sometimes, but I feel like it's really, really aware of when that works and when it doesn't. So this stands out to me because it does have like Spider-Ham, who is the character that is the joke. He's like the biggest, haha, look at this character in the entire movie. And they use him not to be like the comedic undercut of the serious moment, but to be the heaviest emotional hit where he's the one sitting there going like, the hardest part about this job is you can't save everyone. And I think like it's a great line overall, but I think if another character had delivered it, or if Spider-Ham had been the one had made a joke after that, it wouldn't have played quite as well. And that's fully how the MCU would have done it.
100%.
Looking
Yeah.
at you, Marvel. Yeah.
Oh man, but unfortunately, this is goodbye because they gotta go shut down the collider. But the mission is still too dangerous, and they cannot bring Miles. He is not ready. So Peter's like, "Hey, if you Venom strike me right now or turn invisible to sneak past me, you can come with." Miles can't do either one, so Peter B ties him up so he can't follow, and tells him, "You don't know when you're ready because it's a leap of faith." And then they're gone. Alright, so Miles' dad shows up to tell him the news about his uncle, but, like, since Miles doesn't open the door, he assumes he's still mad at him. And he just tells his son that he loves him and he sees this spark in him that he'll do great things, and, oh god, what a heart-wrenching scene. Miles can't say anything back, but...
It's great, but I also just spent the entire time, because I've seen, like, the first few times I watched this movie, I was like, heart-wrenching. But this time, I was watching it and I was like, what if this was just Miles' roommate?
I think about
like,
that every time too, right? Yeah.
He sees the shadow and he's like, I know you're there. And I'm not saying this is like a criticism of the movie. In fact, like, when we finish the recap, I'll go into why I don't care about this as a criticism whatsoever. But it is something that I find funny, where I'm like, how funny would it be if his dad was just like giving this heartfelt emotional speech and it was just his roommate with headphones on so he can't hear that anyone's at the door, like jamming out.
Oh god, terrible. Luckily, it is Miles, and he does hear this all.
He does.
That gives it. That's the final thing that, after all these simultaneous events happen in the span of like a couple hours, I guess. But he had a rough day, man.
Yeah, I mean, when the team leaves him there tied up, that's really like that's the end of his, like, as I was saying, long run of just having the shit beaten out of him emotionally and physically. Also, end of Act 2.
Yeah.
Yeah. His dad is the beginning of Act 3.
Nice. And gives him the boost he needs. And here, ladies and gentlemen, we're given the peak of cinema. Nothing else can come close with the "What's Up, Danger" scene. Oh god, it's so perfect. I go back and watch it constantly because it's so good.
I get it. I do too.
It's Miles suiting up at May's house, gets his own suit. He takes his, like, literal and metaphorical leap of faith as he, jumps off of a building, and the glass shattering because his hands were still stuck because he's still scared. But on the camera being upside down as he's falling, but so it means he's actually rising in frame. It's just so perfect. It's perfect. Meanwhile, the other spiders had successfully infiltrated Fisk Tower. Peter B has his moment with this world's MJ, which is so funny. I'm gonna get
So
you all
weird.
that bread.
Oh, idiot.
God, it's so great. So they're getting beaten down at the collider, and like Peter B's all stuck with like Doc Ock, and ta-da! Miles shows up to save the day. They fight. He copies OG Chris Pine's Spider-Man moves to like swing up to the control panel, and that's when like Peter B and Gwen are like, "Well, you didn't teach him that." Well, you definitely didn't. God, it's so great.
The Penny Parker's robot gets destroyed, which is very sad.
It is really sad.
I learned watching it this time because Penny Parker's Japanese. There's the Japanese writing inside of the heart eyes when it dies.
Oh no.
And I was watching it with, like I said, I was watching it with Ian and Kaori, and Ian lived in Japan. Kaori is Japanese, so they were able to tell me what that meant. It's love. It's like heart with the word love inside of it. Yeah. God. It's like it's these little details that you aren't always even able to pick up. Like obviously because we know how to read Japanese, but it's like it's so detailed. It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Penny's robot dies, and then they get the collider like working. So then it's time to send everyone home, which it's like so sad as everyone says bye. So like everyone goes except then it's Peter and Miles left. Fortunately, Kingpin shows up because of course he does. And Peter B's like, I'll deal with him. You just gotta shut off this collider. And Miles is like, no, bitch, you gotta go home.
I have a kind of pulling us back to Star Wars comment here.
Okay.
But not mine. It's not a me comment. I have a comment made by Ian while I was watching it with him that I would just like to throw in here with him.
All right.
He says, and I quote, This has more emotion than all of Rise of Skywalker. Ian Preschel, 2019.
He's not wrong.
He's not.
I mean, like that. So, like this is one of my favorite scenes in the film, and that specifically the "you gotta go home, man" line gets me every time.
It's so good.
Like, yeah, that is a very powerful thing. But I also think that's downplaying a lot of the emotional impact of Rise of Skywalker, which I know I'm seemingly alone on this panel of right now, and we don't need to get into it. But I think there are emotional hits in that movie that, for a certain fan base, are going to hit more than this moment is. But I see Ian's point as a former person who went solely by Starkey. I can see I can see myself in a past life making the same snarky comment.
To be fair, Ian enjoyed the movie Rise of Skywalker, but I wanted to make the comment because it wasn't mine, so I just wanted to pepper that in there. Anyway,
it's also one of those things that, like, that's not really what Star Wars has never been about, like love and emotion and that kind of thing. It's a much more philosophical debate. I would say it's a much more philosophical debate kind of movie than like romantic, emotional, or even just like heartfelt emotional moments.
That's fair. I agree with that. I guess I attribute a lot of emotion to the philosophical elements of it, but like in terms of character, like romance and that kind of stuff,
like the most iconic is different. "I love you, I know." Like that's not true. Like an emotionally charged. I mean, like it is, but it's also undercut with like it being a joke or kind of thing, as opposed to like a really touching, heartfelt moment between two characters.
It's fair. They all go home. Kingpin shows up to beat the hell out of Miles Morales.
Yeah, they fight. Then like they're on a train. Homeboy's abandoned by his family in every dimension as they see him trying to kill Spider-Man again. He's like, "Oh, well, there goes your fucking plan, idiot."
Yeah. I also love if you think about the idea of Kingpin's plan, he's stealing his family from another Kingpin who's just going to be also super pissed about that.
Right.
So it's like, man, you're potentially making your own enemy for the sake of like your personal like need to have these people back in your life.
I'm looking forward to like 10 years down the line, Kingpin finally succeeds and we get a Civil War style movie, except instead of it being like all the heroes fighting each other, it's just a bunch of Kingpins fighting each other. Oh my god, this is BioShock Infinite.
Yep.
Oh man.
There's always a lighthouse.
There is always a lighthouse. There's always a man. They beat Kingpin. Well, Miles beats Kingpin. The rest are gone.
Yeah. As fight goes on, when it looks like Kingpin has Miles beat, Miles hears the encouragement from his dad, who's there, like, oh, he's like finally accepting Spider-Man, tells him to get up. He does, and he shoulder touches that mountain of a man and sends him straight to hell. But not actually, because he's, Spider-Man. Collider blows up, then they all get to like safety. Miles gets to call his dad and gets to reconcile with both himself and as Spider-Man. And then closes out the movie about what he's been doing as the one and only Spider-Man for the past 2 days.
Mm-hmm. But he's not the only one.
He's not alone, and that anyone can wear the mask. And
I love that theme.
It's really
it's
a real good.
We did gloss over that earlier, but like the Stan Lee cameo and kind of introducing that idea,
right?
And MJ saying it in the speech.
It always fits eventually.
It always fits. Yeah.
I mean, like when Logan was saying and I was saying like the death of Spider-Man part is with the people reacting is my favorite. What I really consider like my favorite is that sequence of, when I'm Not Scared of the Dark plays. Yeah. And that includes like, him seeing us seeing everyone's reaction to Spider-Man's death, but then us seeing him buying the suit and Stan Lee giving the best Stan Lee cameo with like
easy.
It's funny, but it's also heartfelt, and the comedy of it doesn't undercut the heartfeltness of it. It just makes it better somehow. It's so good.
And it was also, apart from like the Deadpool 2 re-release, this was like the first one that came out post Stan Lee passing, so it had like it had that extra punch of like sadness and melancholy behind it.
It also feels like this and the quote at the end of the movie too from Stan Lee. Like it feels like kind of the entire like ethos of like what Stan Lee's message was like distilled right there into like that one line, just like it always fits eventually. Like anybody can wear the mask kind of thing. Like it's like that's literally what like his entire career was kind of saying. And then so it's like it's beautiful in that way too, where so many of his other cameos are just kind of goofy one-offs, and this is him kind of being like, hey, here's a goofy joke at the end too, but like also this is what I've been trying to say for this entire time. And I think it hits harder for that reason as well.
It feels like such a, I know they didn't like plan it this way, but it feels almost like willed by the universe that this was the first Stan Lee cameo post-death, because it feels like not just the like it always fits eventually, which does feel like, you know, a Stan Lee send-off, but also we were friends, you know, it plays as a joke, but when, I'm sure it was written as a joke, but when you're watching it and this is Stan Lee's most iconic character, arguably, and this is post Stan Lee's death, it's like, yeah, you were friends. Like this, this is your legacy.
It's like it's another one of those Easter eggs throughout the movie. There are a ton of different Stan Lees scattered throughout. Like he's in a lot of the subway cars and stuff. He's when Peter B and Miles like fall from the subway train or they're on the street, like Stan Lee's the one who like walks right over them instead of walking around them. And one of the stories I heard was because like just so many of the animators on the film wanted to put their own Stan Lee in the background of a shot or something, because they all wanted to, you know, celebrate the man who led them to this.
That's fantastic.
Oh, that's so great. That's so sweet.
So that essentially wraps it up.
Yeah, because we get a little tease of Gwen opening a portal at the end, and then of course the good old end credits scene with Oscar Isaac and a meme. So you love to see it.
Yeah, Spider-Man 2099. That makes me very excited. I'm really excited to see Spider-Man 2099 going forward. I assume going forward.
I mean, like, I love that it's introducing the potential in the sequel between him and the Gwen opening a portal that they can interact again without the threat of like somebody's gonna,
the world's gonna end.
The world's gonna end, or they're gonna glitch out or something like that. So like we'll be able to enjoy them together again without a world-ending. Well, I'm sure there will be a world-ending catastrophe that they're having to band together for, but you won't have to worry about like their safety necessarily as a result of like a ticking clock that's gonna end with them being glitched out of existence or something.
It also introduces the idea that like maybe they do have more of a bond the next time we see them, because it's not just like they've all been separated completely until we see them meet again. It can be like, yeah, Gwen opened a portal, like Gwen's been hanging out with Peter, they know each other really well, their bond is stronger and more cemented. So guys, that's the movie. What do we think? What are our feelings after watching this movie again? Trevor, as our guest of honor, why don't you take it away?
It's a real good movie, you guys.
It's a real good movie.
I don't know if I made that apparent by the fact that I saw it 9 times in theaters and have continued to watch it like on a semi-regular basis since it has come to streaming and home video and stuff. I love just the humor, the pathos, the action, the beautiful animation style of this film. Like I said, it works on virtually every level for me. When we get into the section of like what changes would you make, I have 2, and they're pretty much the only 2 little very nitpicky things I would change about this movie. So it's a nearly perfect film for me, and I love it anytime I get to go back and watch it.
I agree. It is definitely fantastic. The amount of like things you can talk about that are amazing is like the animation's amazing, the writing's amazing, the direction's amazing, the action's amazing, everything is so detailed. Chloe, what do you think of the movie?
Perfect. I love it so much.
we have a trend these past couple weeks, just us coming in and being like, this movie's perfect.
This movie's perfect. Last week is Paddington 2. This week is this movie. The only thing is that
Fury Road before that.
Right, yeah.
She didn't love that one.
I didn't love Fury Road though. We'll see how I feel about it when time passes, but either way, I've seen this movie. This is tied on my letterbox for most watched film. So love to see
Wow.
that. Yeah. I only have it 5 times.
What, like tied against, I'm guessing, like a Transformers or something?
It's actually tied against Incredibles.
Oh, okay.
But Transformers
Still
is
Interesting.
second.
To quote a Nick Cage-ism, which isn't really Nick Cage, it's what, like Andy Samberg. It's high praise.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so good. Love this movie dearly.
Logan, what about you?
I think I like it the least of anybody. I'll say that. And that's with
Interesting.
me following that up with being like, I love the movie. I think Into the Spider-Verse is great. I think it's a phenomenal film. For me, it's also it's the theme. Like, Into the Spider-Verse is what I wanted the Zack Snyder Man of Steel movie to be. In a lot of ways, I want it to be this kind of thing of like hope and right, like anybody can wear the mask, anybody can wear the cape in that character. Like it is this thing of like, it is ultimately about like hope and taking a leap of faith and trusting yourself and like belief and all these kind of things. This kind of optimistic thing. And whereas I think Man of Steel ultimately wasn't that movie, I think Into the Spider-Verse is, right. And I think me and Ben talked about like the fact that we love the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, and I think part of that is because I think it wrestles with a lot of the kind of complicated nature of being Spider-Man, right? And kind of the toll it takes and the sacrifices it takes. But ultimately, for me at least, the hope embedded in that character, right? Like I think of Spider-Man 2 much particularly, and kind of the hope within that character, right? And the sacrifice in that character, right? And the fact that like we're all Spider-Man ultimately. Like I think of the train scene in that movie. And I think Into the Spider-Verse has a lot of those themes woven within it, right? Like I think for me, ultimately, I don't know what my favorite scene in the movie is, but I think it very easily could be the same scene Ben talked about of just from everybody learns Spider-Man's dead, seeing Stan Lee, and then for me it is like in the theater at least, my favorite scene unquestionably was just the Spider-Man scene and just hearing Mary Jane's funeral oration for Peter Parker, because I think it's incredibly beautiful, and I think it's incredibly beautiful, and I think it's kind of the best summation of who that character is and kind of and what he stands for and what he kind of represents to everybody else, and I think the kind of the recurring themes of that in this film, I think the recurring theme of great expectations, not the book but just like the weight of that, right? Like there are great expectations for you, right? Like you're the best of us, Miles. I think that this kind of the recurrent arc of expectations and promise and potential, and that there's a spark within you and that you can do this thing, you can do this great thing. You just to kind of take a leap of faith. Those are all themes that I'm very much in love with, that I very much kind of identify with and hold on tightly. And so this is very much a movie that is made for a mark like me. And yeah, so I love Into Spider-Verse. It is a great, great, great film. It is beautiful. Just every shot, every scene, every frame of it. And yeah, I adore the movie.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought up Zack Snyder because that was something I wanted to talk about too.
Yeah.
Because like I like Man of Steel. I enjoy that movie, but
I like Man of Steel.
I think Zack Snyder is someone who when people talk about like what makes Zack, if someone likes Zack Snyder, a thing they often say is like Zack Snyder tries to make comic book movies as accurate to the comics as they can be. Most specifically, it's talked about in terms of like Watchmen. And, you know, Watchmen was that movie that everyone said was like unfilmable. You cannot film Watchmen, the comic, as a movie because so much of what is inherent to that comic is in the comic. And I think this movie kind of disproves the idea that you can't film a comic when has elements that are inherent to comic books, because this movie's kind of just like, why not just use comic book elements? Why not use paneling? Why not use those kind of little splices of detail? And also it just kind of looks at Zack Snyder and goes like, I'm not saying you have to make a movie this way or make a comic movie this way, but especially with Watchmen, Zack Snyder was so heavily trying to make Watchmen feel like the comic. And I think this really proves like that can be done better and to a greater extent. There's just so much comic book in this, like not just the paneling, but the fact that the way the animation style is used, instead of having like blurred backgrounds. They make the backgrounds look out of focus by essentially doing the offset printing style, where it's like the blues and the reds aren't perfectly lined up, so it looks blurrier to you. It's like everything about this movie is or like when they removed squash and stretch, which in animation is like, you know, when you bend down or like when you reach, your body changes shape, and squash and stretch is made to essentially like accommodate the way a body would function. But when they were animating this, they were like, well, in comic books, you just draw someone in the form you want them to be in, which is why so often you see people make fun of poses in comic books. Not to say that there aren't poses that are deserving of being made fun of. There are. But you see that because like a pose isn't necessarily made to functionally flow from one moment to the next. It's made to like be that image. So in this, they did the same thing where they're like, yeah, we don't need squash and stretch. We can just draw them with like elongated arms to create the effect. And I think that's one of the things I love most about this movie is that, like I touched on this earlier with the idea what if like Miles' dad was talking to Miles' roommate, and like, yeah, that's funny. And it's the same thing with like, oh god, or like how did Gwen get into the school? That doesn't make sense. But the reality is that things don't always need to make sense in a story. That you can find a nitpick, you can find a plot hole in anything, no matter how hard you try. What matters is that you convey the right feeling. I took an editing class when I was in community college, and like one of the things they taught is there are like there's like an order of sacrifices you make when you're editing for storytelling, which is like, oh, if this edit doesn't flow properly, but it conveys the emotion correctly, still then do it. Basically, the rule is emotion is the last thing you sacrifice. If it feels right, even if it doesn't make narrative sense, because you have to sacrifice the narrative to conserve the feeling, you do it. And I think that's just like a good storytelling rule, and a rule that this movie really knows is it's more interested in making you feel the way it wants you to feel than necessarily always sticking to what makes the most logical sense. Which isn't to say just like throw out logic entirely, but know when to make those sacrifices and do it well, and do it in a way that people won't think about because they're so caught up in the feelings. I love this movie. This has been my rant. Anyway, off of me talking a lot. Guys, we've touched on this already about what our three favorite scenes are. I know Logan and I have already talked heavily about, I think, Scared of the Dark and that Spider-Man death scene.
It's so perfect. Yeah.
It's so good. I rewatch it a lot.
It is. It's like my runner-up. When I was thinking about top three scenes, like that just misses out as like my number 4. And I love, like, one of the things I love about that scene is how like true to life it feels. Like the first thing we see when we're hearing I'm not scared of the dark is people finding out the news on their phones and seeing that and just seeing like the phones lighting up their faces and stuff, and the emotion and the sadness on those lit up faces is an image that like haunts me and sticks with me.
For me too, like a final thing on that scene too is just like all the people in the crowd's wearing Spider-Man masks too. Like that shot gets me like every time as well, which is like, fuck, like that does feel like, again, like to the point for me, like something that does feel kind of real, where like everybody would be wearing his mask, kind of like one less way to like honor him. And like, again, I think for me, it's the thing, like so often we don't get to see like kind of the legacy either we as like people ourselves make, or just like kind of these heroes themselves get to make. We don't get to see kind of what happens once they're gone anyway. And like to see like, we all have a piece of Spider-Man in us going forward. I think it like would be the impact Peter would make. Like it's, I think, a really beautiful demonstration of that.
Yeah.
So it's flawless.
It's a weird comparison, but I would say like the visual comparison I think of when I think of the mask comparison is like in the days after 9/11, everybody buying flags and everybody having flags.
Sure.
Regardless of what happened, you know, in the following, like in that moment, that was how everybody displayed, and you saw it everywhere. Like stores like sold out of any kind of flag imagery and stuff because like everybody was trying to represent that.
So if this is your runner-up, this is your number 4, Trevor. What is one of your
top threes? One of my top 3 we already talked about is the What's Up Danger I know that's up for on a couple other people's lists, and Chloe, I think, very expertly highlighted the like. It has been my background on my phone since first seeing the movie. Like I took that shot of Miles. I pulled it from the script directly. Miles walks to the edge of the roof, the wind buffeting, and leaps. The camera is upside down. Miles isn't falling through the frame; he's rising. Like that shot is my favorite shot in all of animation, if not all of film. The visual like weight and beauty of that shot, and so it's been my phone background since seeing this movie, and it just like it along with everything else going on in the "What's Up Danger" sequence, like that one image alone just like puts this movie above and beyond so many other things for me. That's one of mine.
Chloe, what about you?
Of course, What's Up Danger? I feel like that's on everybody's list. But I like the goodbye scene as everyone goes home and you see everyone's like little colorful things as they go back to their own worlds and their own little goodbyes. You know, Peter Porker gives him a little hammer and he's like, it'll fit in your pocket. He says, you know, that's all, folks. I was like, can he say that legally? It's funny and it's also just so emotional. It's like, oh, you like these people.
Yeah. And he does that little like Jesus pose as he flies into.
He T-poses away.
Yeah. He T-poses away, you're right.
Yeah, right? Oh my god, it's perfect.
Logan, how about you? What is one of yours?
So we've already done two of mine. The other one I have, aside from, again, the kind of death of Spider-Man and What's Up Danger, is actually the scene directly before the What's Up Danger, which is where they're all in his bedroom together, basically. And it is them all like kind of confronting him and being like, you can't come, you can't do this kind of thing. Like Peter grabbing him by like the like chest basically and like holding him up and being like, do it right now, and like show that you can do it kind of thing. Him like spinning him around basically. And then him actually giving the line that becomes kind of the iconic moment in What's Up Danger, which is like, how do you know? It's like, it's a leap of faith. That's all it is. It's a leap of faith, right? And then like tailing that into then immediately having him and his dad have their interaction. Like that scene, I love because it sets up a lot of what's going to be paid off in the very next scene. And actually in a lot of ways hits me even harder. Like if I had to rank it, What's Up Danger is my like third one, and then that conversation, like that whole scene, and then the death of Spider-Man are kind of my top two. And just like I think that scene, the way it's like paced, the way like everybody's outside his bedroom like window wanting him to like be able to like use one of the powers at any moment, it's just like he just can't do it in the moment. And then all of them kind of like disappointedly like leaving. Just the way that scene and exchange with him and Peter and then him and his dad go, like gets me emotional like every time basically.
Trevor, what is your second?
So my second one has also already been kind of alluded to and talked about. The final conversation with Miles and Peter B. Parker, kind of as the last goodbye.
It's excellent.
Him like re-echoing all the moments in that scene that Logan just kind of spoke to. Him grabbing like Peter B and holding him in the same way that Peter B held him, and telling him, "You gotta go, man." Just his like Shamik Moore's delivery of that line just like every time crushes me.
It kills you.
And it is the you know the teacher or the student becoming the teacher moment, or Peter B like realizing you're right. Like so much of this movie is Miles becoming Spider-Man, and in this moment it is like Peter B re-becoming Spider-Man and recognizing that like he has a life to go back to and he can turn it around. And I love that sequence.
I agree completely. It's also, I forget the exact line that Peter B. Parker says, because I jotted it down as I just love like grumpy old men characters saying blank kid. So I forget what Peter B. Parker said exactly. Maybe it was just like good job, kid, or something. I think it was more emotional than that. But then also,
not bad.
There are
kid.
a lot of other movies that do it. That was
not
one.
Bad Kid as he's falling into it. Yeah, I have the script pulled up on my monitor as well.
Nice.
Good. Thank you for remembering what I definitely forgot. But yeah, him saying "not bad kid" as he falls makes me want to cry. And it's just like, that's such an easy way to get to me, because The Last Jedi does the exact same thing when Luke says "see you around, kid" to Kylo and then disappears, and I'm like, I'm a sucker for that beat of storytelling. Chloe, do you have a third one? Have we? Yes.
Yeah. It's probably the first time that they go to Aunt May's house, and like she opens the door, she's like, "Oh, no more fans," and then she sees Peter B. Parker, who, you know, she's already met like 3 other Spider people, but this is the first one that looks like her nephew, and you know, she like drops the bat, she goes up to him, she's like, "You look tired, Peter." Like, oh God, it hurts so much. It's because you know, it's sad.
Well, it's not even that. Like his actual line is like, "I am tired, Aunt May." Like he actually just says like, "I am tired." And that's the one that gets me too.
It's just,
I love Peter B. Parker.
I do too.
Yes,
depressed Spider-Man. It hits you.
Oh yeah, 100%.
It's the weight of with great responsibility, or with great power comes great responsibility after 20 years. And
well, this is the thing, right? When like Miles early in the movie says like, with a great power, he says like, "Don't you finish it? Like, don't finish that line. Like, don't do it." Right? Because like because like he has a kind of reality of Uncle Ben having actually said it to him, and then B, like living with it for 2 decades and like understanding the weight of that, and like losing so much, and like Aunt May is gone in his world, right? And he's lost Mary J. Like he's lost kind of so much and suffered so much. Like he's had all of the shit that like the like Chris Pine Peter Parker's had, and then done it for twice as long and had really like none of the benefits of it. Like he's just suffered so much that everyone is just like, don't you dare tell me like I don't understand what that means, kind of thing.
Yeah, like all of his support is gone.
Yeah. It's a great example of like the sincere meta-ness of this movie, because a lot of movies have things where they're like, "Oh, here's that line, you know," and then one character says "don't," and that cuts off the line, and you're like, haha, they almost said it but they didn't. But like that's the entire point of it. It's the joke of they almost said it but they didn't. And this movie is able to go beyond that and be like, yeah, he almost says it but he doesn't, but it means something. The fact that Peter Parker Spider-Man is the one saying "don't," it isn't just like, I've heard that too much. It's, I can't hear that right now.
Yeah,
I'm not that person. It's great. My third favorite scene, all the ones you guys have mentioned have been great. What's Up Danger is my second favorite, and we've all talked about that immensely. Everyone's talked about that immensely. But my third favorite is the spray painting scene with the Great Expectations. I love that scene. It's just, it's fun. It's a good time. I feel like I immediately understand the relationship Miles and Aaron have, which I feel like is really important to this movie. I love the little fake out with the spider when it's like first crawling up him and then it just falls off and then it crawls up again. I love the bite and and Miles just kind of like slapping it off. It's not one of the most like emotionally resonant scenes because this movie is obviously filled with them, but I just love how fun and well edited and well shot it is. Trevor, what is your final favorite scene?
So my final one is pretty much the entirety of the Alchemex sequence. I talk about this a lot when I talk about this movie. Like that whole, I want to say it's like 11 minutes is virtually flawless. It has incredible humor, be it the step 3, re-examine my personal biases. All right, let me tell you the good news. We don't need the monitor, or the bagel moment. Like it has pathos of Miles insisting that he's already watched one Spider-Man die. He's not going to do it again. That's why he like joins Peter B in the vents and stuff. Has great action with the Doc Ock fight. It has the great and incredible Doc Ock reveal, which is a wonderful surprise. It introduces the stakes of the film of like the world, you know, a black hole under Manhattan. It gives you the ticking clock of like in 24 hours do that, and then it also introduces ass kicking Gwen Stacy, Spider Gwen. And on top of all of that, there are just so many beautiful design choices that can and did fuel countless articles analyzing every single frame of animation in this film. But like in that sequence in particular, I saw so many that were kind of exploring that. So like that entire 11 minutes is like just a near perfect scene for me.
It's fantastic. I mean, like so much of this movie is just fantastic. I feel like that's what we're getting at, because everything everyone has said, I'm like, yeah, that's a great scene. That's so amazing. And it fully makes sense that it's a favorite, because this movie is just chock full of things deserving of favoritism.
I mean, I have like a final point that I never noticed the first time because I didn't know it was going to happen, but like watching it for a second time now, like speaking of like the Doc Ock reveal, when they were watching her video in the lab earlier, and like because she's talking obviously, and like Miles perfectly blocking her name to where like at least says like Doctor like O,
Yeah.
but you can't see the rest of kind of thing, and then he moves and you see her like her first name, but you still don't have like the last name kind of thing, and it's like, man, that is such a well done shot. And then like literally to where like it doesn't, the camera like has him like walk into the camera, so you never see what's behind him. It's like such a well done thing to like tease you, but never actually reveal like what is kind of happening behind you.
Yeah.
There's great little moments
Yes.
with Doc Ock too. Like the one I really like is that she's like, oh, I'm Doc Ock to my enemies, I'm Liv to my friends.
Yeah.
And then later when they break into the house, Aunt May is like, it's Liv. And I just love that little hint of like there's backstory here. I don't know if it's like straight up the comic storyline where Doc Ock and Aunt May almost get married, or if it's like something else, but I love that there's some connection there.
Yeah, and the fact that it is like a completely new interpretation of Doc Ock was wonderful, and I love like her design aesthetic and like basically putting her dreadlocks up into like the head of an octopus kind of thing. Just another great element of the film.
Speaking of loving a character, this brings us to our next little segment in this show. Guys, who is your favorite non-protagonist character? And I'm going to add an addendum here. Who is your favorite character that is not Miles Morales or Peter B. Parker?
Smart.
Thank you. We'll kick it off with our guest of honor.
So I basically had two because I didn't know if Spider-Gwen was going to count or not. But since you have said she does not count, like I'm going to say Spider-Gwen. Doc Ock would have been my alternate for a lot of the reasons I just kind of spoke to. But Spider-Gwen, I think, in addition to like an incredible design, incredible performance by Haley Steinfeld, she. The note I put here is like her maturity beyond her years really showcases in the moment that she's trying to talk Peter P down after his run-in with MJ, because she's clearly in this world had to deal with seeing two people with the face of her dead best friend Peter Parker. So she's speaking from like experience here, but she's also like 16, 17, and is being able to like calm down the midlife crisis having Peter B. Parker who's going through the same thing. So I love so many things about her, but that's like one moment that stands out to me in a film filled with them.
She's so cool. Like her intro sequence too, when you see her in her world and like her music is playing, is amazing. Also, shout out to Christina Steinberg, who is a producer on this film, because originally Spider-Gwen was going to be a love interest for Miles, like more of a straight up love interest for Miles. And when they decided to cut that, they almost cut Spider-Gwen from the film overall. And Christina Steinberg was the one who really, really pushed to keep Spider-Gwen in it. So Phil Lord had a quote that I noted where he said, like, Christina kept us honest as five boys making a movie. It was really good to have another filmmaker there going like, I don't think you guys want to do it like this. So an important statement on like having differing perspectives, especially across gender and race lines when you're making a film. And it's cool of them to also acknowledge that they are guys and they should listen to women. A lot of men don't.
Yeah, not kidding.
Yeah.
What? Oh.
Oh, God.
So, speaking of listening to women, we're not going to listen to Chloe. Logan, who is your favorite non-protagonist character?
Yeah, I think Spider-Man is definitely a great one. Weirdly enough for me, though, I think watching the second time, the person I'm going to pick is actually Aunt May. Because she's awesome. Like, it's like, this is like easily like my favorite interpretation of this character, I think. Like, she, and like, part of it, I think, is the fact that like, it's one that's so lived in that world that is like so established that is like, so, just like, she knows too, like, she's not like, I don't know that Peter's not Spider-Man. It's like, she knows everything about it. She's so smart. She's so clever. Like, she made Miles to like his shit. Like, she's on top of everything.
She's basically his guy in the chair.
Exactly.
In
right.
the
And
universe.
like,
yeah.
It works so well. And like, she's still like, she's very funny. Like, she's got like, I feel like she combines all of the aspects of like all of the live action Aunt Mays and like into one character, and it works so well. And then like still has like these big emotional beats with two different characters. Like watching it is like, man, she's such a like kind of stealthy part, but like such a big part of this film, like the arc of at least two of the characters. So like I actually want to pick Aunt May.
For sure.
Right.
Chloe, how about you?
So yeah, I also wasn't sure if you were gonna like have us not pick any of the spiders. Otherwise, it would be Spider-Gwen. But I guess since Trevor said that, I'll probably Prowler. Since it's it's Uncle Aaron, both of them.
Yeah.
So his dynamic with Miles, he's like a villain, but he's also like not, 'cause he's conflicted. Whatever. All that shit.
I feel like his death to me is more emotionally impactful than Uncle Ben's death.
Same for
Uncle
me,
Ben's is
actually.
significant. Yeah, Uncle Ben's is significant, and like I feel bad for Peter when Uncle Ben dies, but I feel bad overall when Aaron dies. Maybe it's because you also see like Miles' dad react to it like in real time too, so it has more of a double hit, but it hits me hard.
Yeah.
Just because I'm curious, Chloe, since I stole Spider-Gwen from you, sorry.
No,
what
that's
are
fine.
some of the Spider-Gwen things that you love about that character?
Basically
if you had
everything
chosen
that
her.
you said, and also that she looks cool.
Yeah.
Because I am shallow like that.
I mean, like,
It's true. She
one of
has
the-
a great design.
one of the incredible achievements that I think this film does is it, by pairing up Spider-Gwen and Miles, I think it strengthens both of those characters in a way that their kind of original origins didn't necessarily manage. And so like seeing that dynamic play out in this film also leaves me excited for like the potential of that being in like the next PS4 Spider-Man game, or probably for the PS5 or whatever, but like the next Spider-Man game. I would be very curious to see if they continue with like Peter and Mary Jane, and then they introduce Gwen Stacy as like a romantic interest, or just a friend interest. See her added into the mix in Insomniac games, and I think this like gave me a great proof of concept for how you can play with all four of those relationships and dynamics.
Yeah, I was also going to choose Spider-Gwen for all the reasons you guys have said. And my backup was Prowler. So thanks, Chloe.
You're welcome.
So
You had to just fly out of the seat of your pants here now, Ben.
yeah, okay. So my favorite character then that isn't one of the ones already mentioned is I'm gonna give it a tie. I'm gonna say Spider-Man Noir just because he's funny. He's very funny.
That was
I
my
enjoy him a
third
lot.
option.
But also Jefferson Davis. Obviously,
Yeah.
I'm a big sucker for like father-son dynamics, especially damaged father-son dynamics in movies. And even though Jefferson definitely isn't like the most significant character in terms of screen time in the movie, when I do see him, it feels very impactful. And like we were talking about that, going back to the scenes, we were talking about the I'm not scared of the dark scene, and Trevor was talking about how powerful it is to see the people looking at their phones reacting, and that definitely is. That's a scene that's a shot that haunts me, but the shot that haunts me also is the one right before that, where it's like Jefferson and his wife, whose name escapes me at the moment, are sitting at the couch, and the TV is announcing that Spider-Man is dead, and you see this guy who didn't like Spider-Man, but he's still reacting to the tragedy of like this hero, this kid is gone.
This 26-year-old kid,
Yeah, which is crazy. Like, I just turned 25 today. I am a year younger than this married, like, major superhero who is now dead Spider-Man is.
Yeah. Brian Tyree Henry, I think, has like just a great performance as dad.
He delivers his lines brilliantly. The entire cast of this movie is just so good. I can't criticize a single performance that we have in it.
Yeah.
So before we dive into some games, which we're going to try and get through fairly quickly, I narrowed down trivia just because like we can't score when Trevor's here. So some little tidbits, little things to know. Phil Lord described the directors as Ramsey is the action guy, Rothman is the comedy guy, and Persichetti, I cannot say his name well, is the poet. Also, I told you that Spider-Gwen was almost cut from the film. Tobey Maguire was almost considered for Peter B. Parker. the look was created with hand-drawn animation over 3D animation, which is super cool. It is kind of a mirror of a movie we just saw this year that I'm a big fan of, Klaus, where Klaus was 2D animation made to kind of look 3D. This was 3D animation made to kind of look 2D. I'm a big fan of animation that like pushes the boundaries of what animation can be, because I feel like especially 3D animation has been very one note in Western cinema for a while. So it's cool to start seeing more attempts being made.
Yeah,
Also,
I mean, like Pixar and DreamWorks like animation style, and now the Disney like 3D animation has all kind of had that same like feel to it, and this definitely felt like something different.
For sure.
I have a fun one too that Ben hopefully isn't going to say.
Yes.
And I think Trevor knows about this, but like Miles and Peter B. Parker are like animated at different speeds.
Mm-hmm.
And like in particular, like the scene of them like in the woods, like when they're first swinging. And like knowing it now and like looking for it, like, yeah, like they're like animated at different speeds where like Peter's going faster and like he's animated at like, I can't remember like how many frames a second, and Miles is like half of that.
He's animated on ones and Miles is animated on twos. So ones is one new frame of drawing or like of animation per second, or per 24 frames per second. So it's like 20. Yeah. So 24 new animations for each second. And then Miles is animated on twos, so it's like every other frame in the 24 frames per second.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. And so it's like, that's such a cool, again, like there's so many like small tiny deals like that are so cool. Just like, that's such a like small thing that like so many people will miss and never notice. But like when you do think about it and like you do catch it, it's like, man, that is such an ingenious way to kind of design the fact that they are just like operating at different speeds and like operate in this world very differently as well.
Yeah, it's very subtle. It is one of those things that I think it got overblown in how that had been reported out, because it's not throughout the entire movie that like that like Miles is animated at half speed compared to the others, but in that sequence in particular, yeah, it's definitely there. It changes throughout, but I think it changes throughout less so for like drastic thematic resonance and more so for like ease of animation throughout a lot of that stuff, because there are moments I want to say where Peter B's animated on the twos as well, and they change it up, but in particular in that sequence I think it plays very well into that dynamic of the two characters and kind of their skill level at the time.
It is also a crazy testament to how much this movie was kind of just like, we're not taking any of the accepted animation practices at face value, because you don't really animate on twos in 3D animation. That's a very hand-drawn 2D type of thing to do. So I know in an interview with I'm just going to keep calling him Bob because I can't say Persichetti very well. In an interview with him, he was talking about how like a lot of the animators they have are younger. They've only done 3D animation. They don't know how to they don't have it in them inherently to like animate 3D on twos. So they had to kind of teach them all these quality, like had to teach them to do this, had to break them out of their like mold of this is how you do 3D animation, and build a lot of things from the ground up. Like I mentioned that they didn't use squash and stretch has basically been considered like one of the 12 keys of animation, and arguably the most important piece of animation since like the beginnings of major feature animation. It's been around for a long time. So the fact that they were just kind of like, nah, is a really cool example of like breaking away and trying new things. Yeah. And even if this movie had failed, the fact that they were willing to try it, I think is a very cool thing about this production.
Same went for like doing Peter Porker and Spider-Ham in the style of like Looney Tunes. Like that is a largely like lost animation style these days. Given like the kind of move towards 3D animation, and the 2D animation that we still get is very much more computer driven than I think even this was. So like they had to kind of learn or like study a whole bunch of techniques to bring like that character and Penny Parker kind of really into this film and try and nail those designs as well.
Final little tidbit. The comic covers that we see are made to be reminiscent of Steve Ditko and John Romita's art styles merged. They are two major artists in the history of Marvel comics. So that's cool that they didn't just kind of make their own comics. They were really trying to honor the legacy that this movie is building off of. And this movie is very much about legacy. In terms of reception, this movie came out December 14th, 2018. It has a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, which ties it with Mad Max Fury Road, another movie we've talked about in this 2010s month. It made $375.5 million off of a $90 million budget, which isn't too shabby. I do wish it could have made more because it, deserves it. Spider-Man Far From Home made over $1 billion. I hate American audiences.
I saw it for Jake Gyllenhaal.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I saw it for Jake Gyllenhaal as well, and he was fantastic.
He sure was.
In the industry. Tom Holland, called it one of the coolest films he's ever seen. Patton Oswalt, best known, maybe not best known, but known as the voice of Remy the Rat from Ratatouille, if we're keeping this within the animation theme, called it the best superhero film ever made. Barry Jenkins, the director of Moonlight and If Beale Street Could Talk, called it the best Spider-Man film, one of the best films of 2018, the best tentpole film since Edge of Tomorrow. Edge of Tomorrow is a great movie. And said he was stupefied by it. High praise from a very well-regarded director. And my king, my God, my Lord up in heaven, Rian Johnson, called it...
Oh my God, he's dead?
He's dead!
No, he's omnipresent.
Oh, okay.
He is everything and everywhere. Rian Johnson called it the Velvet Underground of superhero films in terms of the influence he thought it would have on superhero films going forward, which I really hope he's right about. It won Best Animated Picture at the Golden Globes and Best Animated Picture at the Oscars, and it's New York Magazine's #9 best films of the decade. High praise all around.
Well deserved.
I agree.
Yeah.
So
I wish more
guys,
people had seen it, but
Yeah.
I do too. I feel like it's one of those movies that like everyone's going to end up seeing. It just wasn't like the big bang in the movie theaters that I'd hoped it would be.
Yeah.
Especially since last year had the absence of a Star Wars movie to compete with.
yeah. But it was like
But either
the
way,
people had already seen, like they'd already gotten their, Spider-Verse-ish fix with Venom. They were like, oh, I don't. And also, I think to Logan's point earlier in the episode, like animated is not a form that we see getting mass appeal for superhero stuff, really ever. Like Big Hero 6 is probably the only other like big budget one I can think of, because even the DC animated ones like Mask of the Phantasm and stuff usually fall much more into the like direct to video kind of camp.
Yep.
Compared to big screen releases.
it is interesting because I feel like, Spider-Man, I feel like there's also a factor of like Spider-Man has been remade so many times that people are probably tired of like, oh, another version of Spider-Man, even though it is so unique and different. But when you look at it, you're like, oh, like another Spider-Man reboot, because like Incredibles did well in theaters. Animated movies do well in theaters, even when I think sometimes they shouldn't.
Yeah.
And like superhero movies do well in theaters, even when I think sometimes they shouldn't. So it is, on one hand, I'm like, yeah, like I know my mom doesn't want to go, like oftentimes, even though my mom likes the themes in animated movies, if I'm like, hey, do you want to watch this movie? And I'm like, it's animated. She's like, I'm not really in the mood for that. So part of me is like, yeah, maybe it hit too many levels where it's like, it's a Spider-Man superhero movie that's animated and everyone's just kind of like, I'm tired of all those things. But it is, I concur with Barry Jenkins, the best Spider-Man film. And I concur with Patton Oswalt, the best superhero film. I don't know if you guys agree.
I disagree with both.
Is your favorite Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2?
Yes, it is.
I respect it.
I would say I probably agree with both. I mean, it's like obviously one of the things that a lot of people are talking about right now is like best movies of the decade, and it's probably my #1 of the last 10 years. So
Damn.
that being the decade of largely the superhero movies and certainly animation and stuff coming back into the forefront, I would say yeah, it probably hits all checks all those boxes for me.
Sure. Chloe, what do you think?
I think I agree with one of those. Best Spider-Man movie. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this brings us to our big game, our moment of truth. I've added 3 to this because there's so many villains in this movie. This brings us to Nailed It with Chloe Naylor, where Chloe reviews the sexiness of the movie's villain, or in this case, villains.
Yay.
For this one, we will be reviewing Kingpin, but also Dr. Olivia Octavius, but also Prowler.
Thank
Chloe,
God.
review the sexiness of these 3 characters.
Absolutely, be my pleasure too. Prowler, it's Mahershala Ali. Yes, of course, he is sexy, especially with the music cues and the theme. He's great. Also,
Is he sexier with the mask on or off?
I'm a sucker for masks, so like, you know.
I kind of assumed.
You know, yeah. But sexy with either way. Doc Ock? Sure, yeah. She's got tentacles. Sure.
What those arms do?
That's what those arms do.
I didn't know Chloe was that much into hentai.
Oh, all in, baby.
I mean, we know her feelings about Venom, so I feel like it makes sense.
I mean, it definitely checks that Grievous box of multiple appendages.
That's true.
That's
Twice as
fair.
many as Grievous, really.
Yeah, you're right. I can't argue with that. Kingpin, he's built like a brick shithouse. No, but I'll steal his wife and steal it and make him a cock. Yes.
Jesus.
That
She's been about cucking lately.
it's it's a fun word to say. Also, no, Kingpin is not sexy.
It is.
Is it?
It is cool when Kingpin fills the entire screen though, so his entire suit just makes the screen pitch black, and then you see his face in the middle of it. Yeah, the dude's huge.
And he looks like the Millennium Falcon with his outline. Yeah, it's funny.
Okay, yeah, I see it.
Yeah. Anyways. Those are my opinions.
So what you're saying is Han Solo should not pilot his ship because he ain't sexy.
Yeah, wow, okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yep. I said that. I made that joke. Did it make sense? No. Do I care? Yeah, a little.
A little.
Working.
A little.
You'll get there.
We can't all be Chloe. So,
Thank God.
You don't want to be me.
This brings us to executive action, where we each, if we were a producer on this movie, pitch one thing that we would change. 1 or 2 things, but there's 4 of us, so 1 thing. Kicking it off again with our guest of honor, Trevor, what is 1 thing you would change about this movie if you were in charge?
So I'm going to go ahead, like I said earlier, I'm going to give you 2, and they're both very tiny, so I can get them both in kind of one.
Yeah.
They're such nitpicky things, but I would eliminate, or at the very least soften, the jump scare glitch that you get with the spider when Miles goes back to examine it, because for what otherwise the rest of this film, very kid friendly, that moment still jumps out and jars me when I watch it, even though I'm watching it for the 20+th time or whatever. So I would lighten that because it feels so tonally different than the whole rest of the film. I don't think it's necessary. I don't think it adds anything. And the second thing I would do is I would add a construction crane into the shot where all the spider people are thwipping away from Miles' dorm room, because it just always drives me crazy that they thwip off and there's nothing. You just see their webs going up into empty sky. I'm just put a crane up there.
It's a Spider-Man 2 video game reference.
It's just there's a whole bunch of pigeons and drones that they're all latching onto. But so I would throw a construction crane in the background to justify how they're all flipping off into nothing. But that's it. Those are the 2 things I would change. I love so much of everything else about this movie that those are the only things that they sat with me from the first viewing, and now they're just my tiny little pet peeves in this movie.
Yeah. I feel like that's probably, I can't speak for everyone, but for me, definitely, I'm in the same boat where I'm I will choose a nitpick, but it is a nitpick.
Oh, yeah.
But before we get to me, we have to get to everyone else. Chloe, what would you change?
It's only flaws that it ends.
You can say nothing. Okay. So you just have 5 sequels ready to go immediately.
Exactly, yeah. Just right there. Put them all out at the same time. Netflix binge that shit.
Gotcha. Logan, how about you?
yeah, it's a weird one for me where I wouldn't. That's the thing. I wouldn't change anything. I think the movie. I don't know where I'd rate it or rank it. I don't know if I'd even give it a 10, like score kind of thing. But like, I don't know if I'd really change anything because I think what the movie is and what it's trying to be in the story it's trying to tell with these characters, like, I think I like what it does. Like, there are beats that I don't necessarily like maybe hit as much as others, but like, I think this movie's, in terms of telling the story it wants to tell, did it as good as it possibly could have done it.
Yeah, and I mean, like we said this before. We're not saying that like we also know what a movie should be. It's or like this is how it should change to make it better, like objectively, quote unquote. If you can really be objective when it comes to movies.
Yeah.
I know Trevor and I were, and Logan, we were all just talking about that before we recorded this. But Trevor's giggling because he likes that I'm referencing his point.
Yeah.
But so like this movie, I think, is pretty much perfect at what it wants to be. And like, I agree with you that
that's my thing.
Even if it doesn't hit you at like the top of the top, it does what it wants to do. And like, it deserves respect for that. Again, not to say that when we say we want to change something in other movies, that we're saying those movies don't deserve respect, or that what we think should be changed is like what should be changed. Because the reality is we're a bunch of people sitting around a table who've never made a movie. And these are people who do make movies, and like, criticism is important, in saying you shouldn't criticize a movie because you haven't made a movie is dumb, but also saying that you know what should be changed is also dumb. Anyway, the thing I would change, okay, this is a weird thing because I don't know how I would change it, and I'm not bothered by it. Like Trevor, the same thing Trevor's saying. It is kind of weird to me that Jefferson Davis calls an APB on Spider-Man, on the new Spider-Man, but we never see Peter being like harassed by Miles. I'm so used to calling Spider-Man Peter. We never see Miles being harassed by the police. I don't really mind because it's clarifying that Jefferson is blaming this Spider-Man for what has happened. And I like that he gets over that by the end of the movie. I've seen the story of like the family member who hates their superhero child or nephew or whatever, and they work for the cops storyline way too many times. But it is slightly weird. It does also make sense to me though, because Jefferson doesn't strike me as the person who would go on like a vendetta of his own. He's the person who would do it by the book. So
yeah,
this is
like, it doesn't, that moment doesn't bother me or as an issue for me, because it strikes me as that's a moment for Jefferson, not a moment for Miles. So we don't need to see how it impacts Miles, really. We need to see how it impacts Jefferson. We need to see that he makes that turn at the end of the movie.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's why I'm saying like it's such a small thing for me, because I agree. It's a moment for Jefferson and it works for Jefferson. And I don't think there's really a way to change that moment itself without hurting the arc of Jefferson as a character. But maybe if there was like some reference later in the movie to the police are after him, but also that kind of affects the pacing. In conclusion, it's a weird little moment. It's a small nitpick. If I really had to change something, I'd probably add the crane shot that Trevor was talking about, because I think that's like an easy change and it makes sense. He has good points. This movie is fantastic.
I mean, like timing wise and pacing wise, the only place you could probably really throw it in there would be in the What's Up Danger sequence. And you just have to add like a scene of like the cops are chasing him and he has to evade them or something like that. So like it could be done. I just don't, with everything else amazing going on in What's Up Danger, I think that muddies the waters a little bit. So
anyway, this brings us to our last bit of games trivia. As I said, we're not going to be scoring this one because Trevor's here and I want him to be able to engage with it. And we also only have like 1.5 questions. But here we go. How many non-Disney / Pixar movies have won Best Animated Feature at the Oscars?
Is this to everybody?
This is to everyone. Feel free to answer whenever you want. If you answer wrong, you just have to wait for everyone else to have a chance to guess before answering again.
I'm going to guess 3.
Incorrect.
Cool.
Can you repeat the question again, Ben?
How many non-Disney / Pixar movies have won Best Animated Feature at the Oscars? Trevor guessed 3. 3 is incorrect. Chloe, were you gonna say
I
one?
was gonna say 2.
Nope. Logan, do you have any thoughts? Any guesses? Any ideas?
I'm trying to calculate in my head with.
Mm.
I feel like it's either non-Disney or Pixar movies have won.
Non-Disney or Pixar movies.
I'm gonna say 5.
You are also incorrect.
Was it 4?
No.
Or 1?
No, it's more
Okay,
than 5.
you can't keep guessing.
Yeah,
No, I'm just curious. I'm just curious.
I'm looking up because I was curious and didn't care about getting the point anyway. But yeah,
Fine.
like going back to 2002, there's already 5, and I'm sure there were more for that.
The answer is 6.
Okay.
6 animated films have won best.
So I was closest though.
Yep.
Yeah, you were closest. We have Shrek was the first movie to ever win best
I knew
animated
Shrek,
feature because that's when it was.
that one.
Then after that is Spirited Away. We then have Studio. Yeah, so we have Studio Ghibli. Then we have I'm trying to remember now. Happy Feet is one.
Wallace and Gromit is the next one. Curse of the Were Rabbit.
Wallace and Gromit is one.
And
So
Happy
that's
Feet.
4.
And Rango. Which
Rango,
I like.
and
So
then-
like those last 3, I'm like, I completely forgot any of those were movies. Like
I've heard really good things about Rango.
I was banking my guess off of like one of the Shreks probably won. There was probably a Studio Ghibli, and then Spider-Verse. So yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that is, and then Spider-Verse is the number 6. Quick note: how many do you think? I know Trevor's looking at it right now, so I'm gonna not let him
Cool.
answer this. How many were years when Disney or Pixar was competing?
Oh, I mean, I definitely wouldn't know that from what I'm looking at, but
Okay, then I guess you can't answer.
How many years what?
How many times do you think a non-Disney or Pixar movie won when there was a Disney or Pixar movie in competition? Because there were some times when Disney and Pixar didn't win because Disney and Pixar didn't have a movie that year.
I'm just gonna split it and then I'll say 3. I'm gonna go half the times.
Nope.
I'm just gonna say my same answer, say twice.
Nope.
Okay. Awesome.
Y'all bad at this.
I'll go 4 then.
Trevor wins with 4.
Hooray!
That's what I
Okay.
did.
Yeah.
That's what I do, Trev.
Which 4 years was it? You know?
Yep.
Oh God. I
last year would've been
definitely
one of
did
them.
now.
Back up your fucking shit,
Wow.
man. All right.
Last year would have been one
I'm
of them,
so-
obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, Shrek beat Monsters Inc. Spirited Away beat Lilo and Stitch.
Yep.
Oh, that's gotta
then
break
what
Ben's
was the-
heart.
It does. It does a lot. Well, that's not true.
Happy Feet
Spirited
beat
Away, I've heard is
Cars.
phenomenal. I haven't seen it.
Happy Feet beat Cars, yeah. Rango beat Nothing. That was fine. Who's Big Hero 6?
Disney.
That was Disney. Yeah.
Okay, is it Disney?
Yep.
Okay.
Disney
Yeah,
animation.
it is.
Into the Spider-Verse beat Incredibles
Yeah.
2.
No kidding.
God, Isle of Dogs is so good. That was awesome. That's such a fucking.
Isle of Dogs was good. I enjoyed that. Not as much as I like
I
Fantastic
love
Mr.
Isle of Dogs.
Fox, but a good time. Chloe and I talked about it a little
I
bit
like
last
it.
week.
I think we should
Interesting.
have a Wes Anderson month.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think I've seen I Like Dogs or I Love Dogs, right? Whatever it is.
Isle of Dogs?
Yeah, Isle of Dogs.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's because I was like, it had that weird like, oh, it's like a play on words. Ha 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 ha. I enjoyed that one, and I'm not.
I love.
I'm not a huge Wes Anderson fan, but that worked for
I
me.
love Wes Anderson.
Sure. Guys, before we go, what are our closing thoughts on Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse? Trevor, again, take it away.
Watch this movie. It's a very good movie. I wish you had
It
watched
is.
it in the theaters, because then it would have made more money and people would have been. The word would have gotten out more and people would have liked it more instead of just like being critically acclaimed and yeah, I think it will be ultimately it's going to go down as a cult classic kind of thing. I'm very excited that Sony stands behind it enough and behind the reception enough and the fact that it won the Academy Award to have greenlit like follow-up sequels and stuff because I very much want to see what they continue to do, what that team continues to do now that there's more support and a bigger awareness behind it. Because like if you think back, this movie got stealth announced when like all the Sony's leaks happened
Right. Yeah.
Like it was basically like that was when people first found out that this was going to be a thing. And like you also have to put that in context with like the timing of when Miles Morales was introduced as a character, when Spider-Gwen was introduced as a character. Like the fact that this movie was in development pretty much at the same time those things were all happening on the Marvel side of things, just like fuels again, like this could have gone wrong so easily, because like reception of those characters might not have been, it might not have made a ripple. So you would have been introducing a Spider-Man that nobody cared about, or a Spider-Gwen that nobody cared about. But the fact that I think this movie made more people care about both of those characters as opposed to pulling away from them, certainly like is something to be celebrated. So go see this movie. It's on Netflix. It's amazing. Watch it many, many times, and then go see the next one when it actually comes out.
Chloe, what do you think?
Perfect movie. I love it so much. So happy to watch it again anytime.
And Logan?
Yeah, I really like Into the Spider-Verse. Again, like we've been on a really good run, I think. Or it's really a really good run for me and Ben. And it's tough. Like the last few ones we've had have been really good bangers. This might be my favorite film we've watched now. I'd have to really think about that. That and Fury Road are both fantastic. But it is a fantastic film. It is easily one of the best superhero films out there. I would say it is easily one of the best films you can kind of find yourself watching on a Sunday morning, as I did today. It is fantastic. The cast, the performances, the script, the writing, visually, it is stunning. And I think the themes and kind of beating heart and soul of this movie and just kind of believe in yourself are all ones that I find very powerful and very moving.
Yeah, I think that I agree with everything that everyone has said. It's phenomenal. I love it so much. It's not my favorite movie of 2018 because Paddington 2 also came out that year, but it is a very, very close second, which is impressive because I saw Paddington 2 at the beginning of 20. I saw Paddington 2 at the beginning of 2018, and I was like, I don't think this movie can be beaten. And for the rest of 2018, that was proven true. And then in like the tail end, December 14th comes along. I watched Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and I'm like, damn, this really tried at the last second to dethrone Paddington 2 for me. It didn't, but it got close. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Thank you for joining us on Movies of the 2010s. Thank you, Trevor, for being our first guest and for getting this whole website thing going. We appreciate it dearly.
Thank you guys for having me. Thank you for keeping this show afloat and going. And it's a ton of fun, and I'm very proud of you guys doing it.
Thank you. We are wrapping up our Movies of the 2010s, but that means we are going into our next themed month. I'm really excited because it's our first themed month that isn't built on a decade. We just felt like, this is the end of the 2010s. We should do like a 2000s, 2010s run. But now we get into the spicy stuff. Now we really get going. And next month, we keep our superhero train going by having a superhero themed month. And we are keeping our superhero animated movies train going because, Chloe, what movie are we talking about next week?
Oh shit, it's my turn. We're watching Incredibles, y'all.
Yeah, we are.
So excited.
Very nice.
I'm very excited. Guys, again, thank you so much. Where can everyone find you? Trevor, we'll kick it off with you one last time.
You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey on Twitter and most social networks at this point. And yeah, follow. If you're listening to this, you probably already do follow That Nerdy Site. So go and continue supporting That Nerdy Site stuff.
Trevor's audio definitely is cutting in and out for me, which is fine because he's recording it. So like that works no problem. Really hope he finished talking and I didn't interrupt him. So many people have ended.
Follow him at Trevor J. Starkey. He probably said something about That Nerdy Site show. Probably said something about that Ultimate Video Game List show. Probably said something about check out That Wannabe Film Class, which you're at right now, in his new episode about Into the Spider-Verse. Probably said to go check out patreon.com/thatnerdysite. And then also Twitch, where we are an affiliate. Also youtube.com/thatnerdysite. When we get enough followers, we're close to it. I know you have to get 100. I think we're very close to that now. I think it's everything to go do all of those things that Trevor asked you to do.
Oh my God,
There you go.
Logan, you mentioned that Nerdy Site show, and you mentioned that Ultimate Video Game List show. That's somewhere people can find you too, right?
That is, you can find me at Lefty Logie on the internets out there. And yeah, I'm on that Ultimate Video Game List show. It is a ton of fun. Love it a lot. The last episode was very hot and heated. Me and Cam are coming to blows over bad video games. It's great. So you can go check that out. We're down to the top 10 as of now, so that's gonna be a lot of fun. And then you can go check out that Nerdy Site show. I actually Ben and Chloe were on 2 weeks ago, I think, when this is being recorded or going live or something. In the time is a flat circle. They were on recently. And then you can also go find me obviously on that Wannabe film class where I'm here right now. I'm very excited to see Incredibles again. And then yeah, you can check all those things. Go check out Patreon, go check out YouTube, go check out Twitch. Frank actually put up a new thing, a video of Ultimate Chicken Horse that we had recorded from the launch weekend. So you can check that out because Frank put in a lot of work. And it is a lot of fun, that Let's Play. So go check that out on YouTube as well.
Awesome. Chloe, where can people find you?
You can find me everywhere at Echo Chloe, Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, all of those. Of course, Letterboxd is the movie one. This is our movie podcast.
Letterboxd
Letterboxd
so
is
good.
so
Hell yeah.
good.
Letterboxd is so good.
I just got like the.
We say that every week.
We do, but it's true.
Sponsor us, all right?
I still don't know. I don't know what I'm doing on it yet. I've still only gotten to the point where I'm like identifying which movies I've watched and whether I like them
That's
or not.
fair.
I've not started scoring
You are.
anything since I figure I should probably leave the scoring of things to the actual website.
Maybe it's always fun to give it just an
Sometimes
arbitrary
I have
rating.
that thought, and then I say, nah,
Fuck it.
Fuck it.
I score
I
everything.
appreciate that.
Exactly. But that's where you can find me.
Awesome. You can find me at Mr_BentoBox on Twitter, at Mr. BentoBox everywhere else. That primarily means Instagram and Letterboxd, as we have so frequently mentioned. I love that website.
So good.
You can also find me and Chloe on the That Nerdy Site show episode that Logan mentioned. And of course, you can find me on this podcast, primarily on this podcast. You can also find me writing things on the website. Trevor, is my Christmas article going up today? What's happening?
Oh yeah, it can. Sorry, I forgot to get back around to that. It looks good.
Trevor's gone again.
gone again.
It's
It's
fine.
fine.
Trevor's
We'll ask
dead,
him
all
later.
right? R.I.P. Trevor. It's a coup d'etat, all right?
Trevor is
It's an
typing
oligarchy
to
now.
inform me because we can't hear a thing he's saying.
We're in charge now, all right? It's chaos.
I love this.
Weird that I can hear
Okay.
you guys and you can't hear me, but whatever.
All right, Chloe's in charge now. Chloe is the new executive editor-in-chief of the
God.
site. It's great.
That's all I've ever wanted.
We're now
I'm
a
sorry,
robot. We are now a robot website.
No, this is not happening.
Yes.
None of this is
Yes.
happening. I'm not handing over the reins to Chloe.
No, that would be a big mistake.
Quiet down, Ghost of Trevor. All right?
Sometimes I can still hear his voice.
I know.
I'm
I miss him
a
so
force
much.
ghost, guys.
Oh my god.
Exactly.
Jesus.
This is my greatest fear, that he can haunt me. I get enough of him.
Nice.
Like what? No, you. Whatever.
Anyways.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this podcast, leave us a review on iTunes, rate us, and subscribe on whichever platform you most want to listen to this podcast on. Maybe it's iTunes, maybe it's Spotify, maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's through the direct link on our website for some reason. You can't save where you're at with that one. I don't know why you would be choosing that, but live your truth. And speaking of living your truth, guys, happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Oh yeah. Happy birthday, Ben.
Thank you.
Happy holidays. Happy birthday, Ben.